Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome. The time is 5:30. Welcome to a special meeting of the Newcastle City Council. This is a joint meeting with the Newcastle City Council, Newcastle Planning Commission. The purpose of tonight's special meeting is to discuss the progress on the comprehensive plan. This meeting is being broadcast live on our YouTube channel, and it is also being recorded for future viewing. My name is Mayor Clark, and tonight we are going to keep this rather informal for the next hour and a half as we discuss the comp plan. So at this point, I'm not sure who's going to start, Director Fitzgibbons or Charlie, or okay, Aaron, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Squirrely. We'll start with, we have Bill Grimes here from SCJ. They're our consultant. He flew in from Spokane today. And then Chair Gatzik will give a quick word, and then we'll go into the question and answer session from there.
All right. Thank you very much, Aaron. Mayor, council members, planning commissioners, it's good to be here tonight. And I appreciate the opportunity for a collective conversation here about the comprehensive plan, where it's headed, and how we might want to see it taking shape as we wrap up our process here.
Would you mind speaking a little bit closer to the mic?
Sure, I'll be
Thanks
happy to do that. I'll try to project too. So you have monitors, so you're able to see the slides right in front of you? Very good. Okay, so there are several things that are required of us as we look at updating the comprehensive plan. This slide identifies many of those. We have to make sure we're consistent with planning in the regional context. We also have to make sure that we're incorporating the results of some recent state legislation. Some of this were things that your existing comprehensive plan already did to some degree, but some of these things are a little bit new to this planning process. You may be aware of some of the housing legislation that the state passed here over the last couple of years that are influencing what we do for policy. And that does a lot to establish the framework that we need to address as part of our comprehensive plan update. So we're not necessarily planning in a vacuum. We are planning to satisfy some of the statutory requirements. Actually, we're planning to satisfy all of the statutory requirements. And we're also looking to do this in a way that fits the city of Newcastle's vision and aspirations for its future. So it's more than just a compliance document. It's one that is actually looking to identify and then achieve some high-level community goals. And where we are in the process here, I wouldn't say we're in the home stretch, but I would say we are in turn 4, where we are working on producing a draft after a solid year plus of community engagement in the process. So maybe putting a bit more of a fine point on it, we have several months still to go to get this to the adoption stage. We are producing the draft now, thanks in large part by the Planning Commission's work to sift through the existing comprehensive plan elements and identify those policies and components of the narrative needing to be touched as part of this process. But we will be completing this draft here in the next couple of months and then readying it to go through the public hearing process, starting with the Planning Commission review to make a recommendation to council and for adoption. The city is obligated by statute to have the plan adopted by the end of this year, but we expect that most of the heavy lifting will be done in the next 2 to 3 months, at least as far as preparing the document for the commission and the council to consider. So some key dates in the recent past, and then also tonight. Back in September, we had a community town hall where it was the community's first opportunity to take a look at some of the challenges in front of us to comply with the statutes, and also to make sure that we were considering policy in ways that were consistent with the community's priorities and overall preferences. I recognize a few faces here at the dais who attended that workshop before they were on the dais. So it's great to have you here tonight in this role. We also had a community survey that was launched earlier this year to take a look at some community priorities and test some of those things that came out of that September session. We had a special planning commission meeting back in February And then at the end of February, we had a community workshop again, but this time it was focusing on the different options available to us as we consider our overall land use scheme and how to direct and influence growth in the city of Newcastle. Now, I'm talking about growth like it's something that is inevitable, but whether it is or it isn't, it's something that we need to plan for. The Growth Management Act and the way it's implemented at the county level establishes a set of growth targets that each jurisdiction, that each county needs to plan for, and then the counties and the jurisdictions then negotiate how much is going to each jurisdiction. So Newcastle has an allocation that we're using as the target for our growth. Now, we, in the last summer, went through a series of events, and the Planning Commission was instrumental in implementing this, where we had a penny poll. Some of you may have seen it, where planning commissioners appeared at various music events through the summer to test community thoughts on some priority topics that seemed to rise to the top in the conversations that we were having in developing the plan. So you can see the results here. Public safety far and away was the highest priority for the community. But then also some other things about a walkable downtown and interconnected trails. Some of these things that begin to really define Newcastle's character came across as reliable community priorities. So you can peruse these results, and I believe that we have these results also posted on the website. Now, we followed up with an online survey where we asked the community some more specific questions about what they're hoping for in Newcastle in the next 20 years. And so people were interested in a little bit more variety of housing type, more than just a single family home or an apartment, but perhaps something in between the two. People, again, consistently looking at traffic and public safety as priorities. Folks appreciating what the natural environment contributes to Newcastle's identity and function, prosperity, and then also finding ways that we can integrate what are called third places, kind of neutral places, public spaces where people can gather without necessarily having to buy something or make an appointment to be there. So it's kind of a casual social interactivity space. It was something that people were looking for. We also wanted to take the opportunity to revisit the community's vision statement that's included in your current comprehensive plan. And by and large, the responses are ratifying that vision, just looking for ways to make it a little bit more contemporary. So those principles that seem to underpin the vision from the existing comprehensive plan still hold true today, but maybe with some of those additional tweaks about variety in housing type, third places, environmental conservation, and so on. Okay, so that gives us a pretty good context of what people are hoping for. One of the statutory components that is probably emerging as one of our greatest opportunities, in lieu of saying challenges, is figuring out how we can satisfy the requirements to provide for a variety of housing by income band. And this is something that's relatively new over the last couple of years of legislative action. We need to not only provide housing units to satisfy our forecast growth, but also to make sure that we're providing housing for all households within the community. So what we have here is that we have a target of providing 1,480 new housing units over the next 20 years. Of those units, approximately half of those need to serve low-income households. We're also looking to find a way to incorporate the ability for 500 new jobs in the city of Newcastle over the next 20 years. And so this equates to a population increase of slightly over 2,000 people between now and the end of 2044. So this is just a little bit more detail on the housing distribution that our plans need to figure out how to accommodate. Now, when we look at the lower income housing, what the state has done is that the state has said that local agencies can't necessarily discriminate housing and prevent people with higher incomes from coming into a community, but what we need to do is we need to figure out that we are permitting housing at a level of density that is consistent with those income levels. So we have an obligation to look at the variety of housing types to make sure that those housing types are suitable to accommodate those individual income or household income needs. So it's a bit of a challenge. What we had was a scenarios workshop in March of this year to put those challenges out to the community. They can take a look at how best we can respond to that. And we had a series of different scenarios that we had developed to address those objectives. The first one was looking at really trying to focus the new development, the new intensification within the boundaries of the downtown. That was the first one. Concentrate new growth where it is already taking root in the city center. The second scenario had a little bit of that going on, but also said there might be opportunities for some gradual intensification of land uses for employment and for housing along the community's major arterials. And as I was coming in on Newcastle Way today, I saw some opportunity sites where maybe, a half acre can be redeveloped into something else, as an example. And then our third scenario is, what if we want to go ahead, really playing on that notion of third spaces, if we were to distribute levels of intensification so we can get like a corner coffee shop and maybe a small apartment building or a townhouse, and locate those things in various places in the community where they might fit. And we asked people, if we were to pursue that policy, where would we see nodes develop? And so participants in the workshop were able to identify, using the ubiquitous dots, things we use in planning exercises, of course, to identify where these types of modestly scaled nodes might take shape in the community. But it was pretty clear that what people were preferring was a land use pattern that is consistent with the pattern that has already been established in the community, which is to focus growth downtown and figure out ways that we can actually accomplish our growth targets within the boundaries of the downtown. So your existing downtown strategic plan and downtown plan essentially get you there by providing for a level of development intensity. In the future, there might be some need to take a look at the development regulations to make sure that the zoning actually fulfills the threshold of development that the downtown plan provides, but we're not at that point yet. We're in the world of policy, and your downtown plan really does check those boxes. We also were looking at what's called middle housing types, which are townhomes or cottage units or accessory dwelling units, some of which the code already permits, but finding ways to support their development and policy so that individuals, if they have an opportunity and a desire, can actually develop some of these accessory units and make them available for housing on the market as well. So that's where we are in the process. Charlie, I know you were thinking about making some comments as well, so I'll turn that over to you. Thank you.
Council members, fellow commissioners, what I'd like to say is really not aimed at you, because you are all people who are in the know. You understand this process. You really understand where we are in the process. But for people who are tuning in and don't follow this like we do, I'd like to say a few things to kind of put it in context. So one thing is that a comprehensive plan is really a broad look 20 years ahead for how we want the city to develop. It's how we want to use our land. The things that are in the comprehensive plan that you are going to be voting on later in the year are things that is only the first step in a change that might be made to how we use our land, because the comprehensive plan offers direction and goals and some strategies, but nothing happens until the city council passes an ordinance that implements those. So it all depends on a lot of practical things, including money. So this is really one step in a change that says this is where we want to go, but it's a long way from being where we actually are making decisions to go. The process that we've been following over the past year, we're probably halfway through a 2-year process. The very front of it, as Bill mentioned, there was a lot of engagement with the community. The planning commissioners attended multiple public events where we mainly just listened. We had the penny poll where we got some feedback in a semi-scientific way, but we listened. What are people's concerns? And so that we could have that background. Then we went through the existing plan and identified anything that we thought maybe was out of date, anything that we thought needs to be changed to reflect where we want to go in the next 20 years. and we marked those changes, and we have delivered those changes to SCJ. They are going, and we have some recommendations that we put forward to you in the agenda memo that identify the broad areas where we think we are going to be recommending a change in the comprehensive plan. This is still a very, very high level activity because between now and when you have a plan to vote on, SCJ is going to take all of the changes and totally rewrite the plan so that it is hopefully easier for the average citizen to understand, has less duplication, and is just a better document to work and guide us all as we govern the city, as you govern the city. So they're going to come back in a few months with very specific language. And then the Planning Commission is going to look at that and say, all right, does that language achieve what we asked for to be the changes? And actually, more importantly, does it preserve what we think ought to be preserved in the plan? Because probably the number one thing that we heard when we were out in the community talking to our citizens, our community, is we love our city, we like it the way it is, don't change the things we love. There's a lot in our existing comprehensive plan that is already protective of the things that make Newcastle the city that we love. And we want to ensure that those things continue in whatever rewrite occurs in the plan. So there is another opportunity, there will be another opportunity for us to refine the recommendations that we've already made, perhaps change them. Maybe conditions will have changed, maybe we'll have more insight. Bill referred to requirements that we have to comply with that are coming from the county planning rules that may affect the housing distribution. We don't know what the implications of those are, but at that point they will show up in that next level set of recommendations that are prepared by SCJ that we then review and we will be refining. So we're still in the molding phase, and we're moving from the, here are the big rocks to here's how you chisel those rocks into sculptures that actually make meaningful guidance for the city council in the future. The changes the major changes that we see, I should say that we will be recommending to you. The biggest one has to do with how will housing density change in our single-family neighborhoods. The state has required that certain types of housing be allowed in single-family neighborhoods just like any single-family home, and that is duplexes and cottages and accessory dwelling units. And so we, as a commission, feel like that is where the city of Newcastle wants to be as well. They don't want to go beyond what the state is requiring. So we are going to be recommending to you only that we comply with the state requirements. It doesn't mean that in the future Newcastle may want to go in a bigger direction. I mean, I think it makes sense to me, and this was pointed out to me by one of the citizens that attended our open house, that let's see how it works. Let's get some experience with it. Let's see how other jurisdictions work with it before we go further. I think that makes sense, and that's the direction that we will be recommending to you. Another recommendation would be that we have something in our plan that promotes that new development be compatible with existing development. And I don't know how that's going to look. I think that's probably a tough thing to accomplish in ordinance, but it's something that we think citizens value, and if there's a way we can achieve that, we'd like to achieve that. We are going to be proposing a change in how we, in the standard by which we measure the adequacy of our parks and trails. Under the current comprehensive plan, there's a standard that is based on population. So a certain number of park acres per 1,000 residents. What we think is a better way to measure that is the distance of a park or a trailhead from any residential area based on walking distance. So this is a standard that's been tested in other cities that we think makes sense for Newcastle, and we're going to be recommending that we go in that direction. We'll be recommending that we make future multifamily development more hospitable to EV charging stations. So if you're going to build an apartment building or a condo, that you have in there the infrastructure to add those charging stations. Not necessarily that you have to put the charging stations in, but before you pour the concrete over the cables that go in your parking garage, let's have some outlets there so that you can put in those charging stations. And also that we would change our sign code so that charging stations that are in parking lots, like our shopping centers, can have advertising and still be compliant. I think that's a service that our residents would like, and right now is prohibited by our sign code. When it comes to public safety, there are design principles, architectural principles that, if they're incorporated in new development, make an area safer just by the way it's designed, just by making things like sightlines more visible, lighting adequate so that it deters crime. We're going to take every opportunity to include those principles in the new comprehensive plan, and we're also recommending that the City Council, that we work with the City Council in the future to explore public safety goals and policies for future adaptation. And I think the last thing I would point out, when it comes to capital facilities, the city spending money to build stuff, the city already has capital plans that go at least 5 years into the future and further, that cover things like sidewalks and intersections, things that are really important and needed. One of the things that has been on our wish list, our meaning the city's wish list, has been a community center, and that's something that there may or may not be a need that would be supported by the community. And we think that at this point it makes sense only to do a study to say, is there really enough demand for a community center? I mean, people talk about it, but they talk about it in the absence of knowing that it's got to cost something to build, it's got to cost something to run. Before we do anything, let's do a study that evaluates, would people really support it? How would they use it? And would it be financially self-supporting? So these are all, in the Commission's opinion, these are not big changes. These are just modifications that move the ship in a few degrees in a direction to keep it on the course that it was largely on, and that where we think the community wants to continue to be on. So with that, I'm going to sit down, and we're going to open this up to your questions. And the commissioners, feel free to answer any question that you feel like you have something to contribute to, and whether or not it's asked to you directly. If there's a question that you think is better answered by SCJ because of its technical aspect, or by our planning director, I'm sure they would be happy to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate that. And let the record show, by the way, that all 7 council members are present and 6 planning commission members are present, because there's currently 1 vacancy, so I failed to mention that. So at this point, I'm going to ask my fellow council members if they have questions for either Charlie, Aaron, Bill, or the other planning commission members. Any questions? Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. So yes, thank you, Charlie. Thank you, SCJ. Just sort of, I guess maybe not as 2 topics here, and I guess one maybe not as much a question, but keeping in mind that this is something that is coming back in front of us and us providing direction. So not in the slides that were presented to us, but the materials from beforehand. They talked about sort of the idea of trying to incentivize, oh God, why is the word escaping me right now? Mixed use zoning. And I'll restate a couple things here of why I think this is a good idea that I know might be apparent to some folks, but just for broader. Looking at businesses, and then sort of like the Newcastle Commons, where it might be businesses on the bottom and then housing units on top. I think keeping in mind a few things here where we want to maintain the feel and compatibility, which is a pretty subjective measure by a lot of regards. I know there's some ways to quantify it, but keeping in mind that the demand to meet new housing units, I think there's 2 elements to it, and why I'm a big fan of it. The first from strictly an economic, right? When we're looking at our own revenue as a city, there is obviously costs that are arising to us that we can't control, like police, fire, even like King County Elections is charging us more, public defenders, you name it. I think when we're looking forward, when we have that sort of property density that generates the most property tax for us than any other sort of unit, right? Single-family homes generate less than a more dense area in terms of more folks there, more folks paying property tax, as well as the economic drivers of sales tax where we're allowing more businesses to potentially work here and operate here. So getting both those at the same time, and as well as looking at that, we have that largest bracket sort of was 0 to 30% AMI. So getting average median income, try not to get in the government problem of using too many acronyms, and accessibility for folks, right? They can go to a restaurant right below them. They don't need to have a car, have that reliance on a car. So I think it's a good idea for a lot of those economic reasons and for us for long-term planning as a city. And so what I would like to see is downtown emphasis as much as possible, mixed-use zoning. And I think it's, that's sort of the economic element. I think from the human element too, right? I have neighbors that are, you know, young family that works in tech that have a young child. And I think with the extra Amazon headquarters in Bellevue, with the T-Mobile headquarters, we're seeing a lot of those folks that would love to call Newcastle home. So providing more of those units and then having it be, I think, a really good economic situation for us if we push for mixed-use zoning. I think that would be really critical. So mixed-use zoning, in my opinion, as much as possible in the downtown area. I would love to see more of that. And then I guess my other question was, we talked about making trailhead standards, right? So I know in terms of parks, our public works team kicks butt, but I know in terms of our trails, a lot of the maintenance is done on sort of a volunteer basis, right? So I guess my question would be, in terms of if we're gonna provide trailhead standards, and we, you know, keeping in mind a lot of the trail maintenance work is done by a volunteer group and also folks doing Girl Scout and Boy Scout projects, can we work in some language about plan in terms of maintenance of trails? Can we work in some language about like the sustainability of maintaining those trails if we're gonna have those trailhead standards in place? If folks understand what I'm saying there. I'm happy to have a dialogue about any of that or.
Good morning, Council. Would you like me to answer that question, or I'm not sure what the format? So actually, most of the maintenance is performed by city staff. The volunteers do improvements like Eagle Scouts will add amenities, a bench, a trail connection, things like that. But the day-to-day maintenance is done by city staff. Newcastle Trails will typically a project-based. So there's a trail and there's a desire to address some drainage issues. It's not necessarily daily maintenance, but it's like an improvement. So that's where I classify most of the volunteer work, but the day-to-day maintenance is done by city staff.
Thank you, Director Bronze. I guess then my question would be too, is the trailhead standards we're imagining for this, would they be above and beyond what we currently have, where we need to expand? Or
No, it's different. It's a different philosophy.
Okay.
Yeah, whereas our current level standard is a length per population base
Okay.
versus a distance and proximity based. Same as we haven't brought it up yet, but same for the parks. Currently it's an acreage to population ratio as opposed to a proximity.
Gotcha.
So I think the proposed level of service makes more sense because it actually addresses how close a resident is to a facility, as opposed to you can still meet the other standard, but somebody could be pretty far from a park and yet we'd still meet the standard. So this really actually reflects how close people are to those amenities or features.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, that answers my question for sure, but yeah.
Okay, who would else? Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I think my first question is for Aaron. Regarding housing supply and needs analysis, you've probably already shared this, but do we have a full analysis of where we are compared to the plan that began charting our progress in 2019 versus the current plan in progress, and are we updating that?
So you're curious how many units we've had come on since the housing needs analysis was
Right.
performed? Mhm. We're at about 100 additional, these are market rate homes that have come in, so that would go towards that market rate end, but on the 0 to 50%, we haven't had any built at this time.
Okay. And we're updating that as we go, apparently.
We can keep sort of informal tabs on it. We will have to provide updates to King County over the next several years about how we're doing in terms of meeting our different implementation goals.
Yeah. All right, thank you. I have a second question. Charlie, I think this is for you and the team. So when you talked about public safety, it sounded like the discussion today is mostly about principles behind SEPTED, environmental design. But I know there's been some discussions around levels of service and things like that. Have you broadened that for SCJ, or where are we going with how deep are we going into public safety?
That's a piece of work that we think needs to be done, but we don't think we're the right people to do it at this stage in the game. We have looked at some other cities' attempts to put public safety in the comprehensive plan, and we haven't found a model that we thought would be easily adaptable. We thought this would be a process that would require a lot of involvement by our police chief as well as council members, and we thought it was better to kind of put that on its own track. So we acknowledge the importance of that and the priority of that, but we don't think that putting it in this plan cycle is really the best place for it to give it its due.
Was there any kind of measures for public service in the last plan?
No.
I didn't think so. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Who else would have questions? Well, go ahead, Ariane.
Thanks. Not really a question, just thank you. You guys have done a lot of really awesome work, and I can't express enough how grateful I am for that. I think I really enjoyed the way this was presented in the agenda packet, just very clearly stating what you all are anticipating as far as changes. And I just think you've done a really awesome job, so thank you. I know there's more work to be done, so I guess my question, to have a question, what all are you hoping to get out of today from us, if anything, to help continue on the work?
I think if there are things that you think we haven't been paying close enough attention to, that we'd like to know about that today so that we can have time to do that. We've heard from some council members about the things that are important to them. We haven't heard from all of the council members, so this is an opportunity that if there was something that you think that we ought to be looking at more closely, you could tell us.
Go ahead, Pradma.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Just like more thinking through, what is the minimum that we need? 50%, is that the minimum that is needed by the state for the 1480 new housing in the next 20 years? Like what is the minimum requirement by the state in terms of housing? Multi or duplex or triplex?
I'll ask Director Fitzgibbons to verify that I've answered this correctly, but I don't think there is a requirement from the state of that nature. The requirement of the state is that we have a plan that could accommodate that growth should that growth come our way. It doesn't, so 1,480 units doesn't mean that we have to add 1,480 units, but most of those units are units that are not like what we've been building, which is houses that cost $1.5 million to $2 million. We have to have a plan that would provide space for a private developer to build something that would meet the income bands for lower income people. And I'm not saying that they have to be, people who are incomeless, but people who are of modest incomes, people who are teachers and firefighters. And so that is the requirement that we have, is to just plan for that so that there is the potential for that need to be met.
And the 100 units that you were talking about, Erin, I'm just trying to understand, what, is that towards the 1480 or?
Yeah, if you were to, those were not accounted for when we did the buildable lands reports, as they call them, but it's just a housing capacity analysis. So that, those have come online since that study was completed. So, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Go ahead, Marion.
Thanks. This actually brings up an interesting conversation that I think we should have. My understanding is the reason we have these housing goals that we need to accommodate for in this 20-year period is because of the Growth Management Act, correct? And so it's not about, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that it's about just meeting the specific number, because the fact is, in the future, the Growth Management Act it's going to grow. That's the first word. And so that's actually going to change over time. So even when we meet that, there's going to be, time will have passed, and then there will be a new Growth Management Act number that we're trying to accommodate for. And again, I want to reiterate what Charlie said, that the city doesn't actually do the developing or build these units. It's allowing that for developers to be able to come in, and our permitting process allows for that to happen. And the details of that sounds like a future conversation as well, as far as code and very specific things that this council will get into, and the planning commission will probably do first, as you usually do for us. But this is a more high level, 20 years out, these are our goals. Please correct anything that I said if it was wrong.
No, that's correct. And I think that's one point of confusion is we still have to update, the population's projections for the state change. Office of Financial Management provide those populations, and it's always a moving target. And so the city, the county really gets divvied out. Okay, this certain amount of population is projected to come in here, and then other committees get together, and then we get down to this number. But in 10 years, we'll have a different number when we're updating this again. And so we've gone above and beyond what they predicted for us 10 years ago, but we don't really get credit for that. It's just like, yay, we have more homes. And then we have to do it again in 10 years. So that it is a moving target, and there will be different priorities. What's different with this comp plan in terms of those priorities, of course, is all of the housing legislation that's come on in the last 4 years. So those are the things that you'll see a big difference in.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. So Director Fitzgibbon, I was curious, so I know I led the effort to join K4C, King County City Climate Collaboration. I think one of the big things they talk about was having policies for situations like this. So I wanted to see if we had sort of been leveraging sort of their resources at all in the development process of this. And then my other question too was I think our waste management does a really good job. And there was a conversation about composting the last time that gentleman was here, not too long ago. So I would love to see something too from the environmental side. I know we talked about electric charging stations. Awesome. Love it, love it, love it. Something about, notably for our retail businesses, encouraging or incentivizing them to compost, and then providing compost services for our renters and our apartment buildings. So if we can coordinate with them at all on that, I would love that. And then also just have we leveraged K4C? Do we need to, can we look through their things, or do we need to connect with them if not?
I regularly attend the staff K4C meetings, and we will be leveraging their help as we go through our requirements for greenhouse gas and for our climate element, which is going to be due in 2029. So definitely it's a good resource for the city. And then in terms of composting, commissioners, I don't believe that that was one of the things that came up in our conversations. But would anyone like to respond to that? Or I think, personally, I think it's a good idea to talk about it or note it.
Yeah, I think we should consider it as a goal.
Okay, well, let me jump in with some questions and comments here. So, again, thank you for your efforts. I've come to a couple of your meetings, and I do appreciate all the hard work. You guys have had extra meetings on top of your meetings, and then these community events. So, thank you. Right, I know it's a lot of time. So, going through the first section here, which is what you recommend, some things I like. I'll just point that out first. The parks change. I like that a lot, where it's based on how far away you are. That's really good. Transportation, underserved street lights, that's good news. I like that. Capital facilities, good stuff there, right? Obviously, we can't afford a community center, but why not look and see what we can do, right? Because I know there's a demand for senior activities and things like that, so all good stuff. Under public safety, a question about CPTED. It says integrate the principles throughout the comprehensive plan. So I assume that would be for just the development in general, but not an individual homeowner, right? So we're not gonna go down to, say there's a new development of 10 homes or something. We're not gonna, I would hope, require each home to meet CPTED because a person's home is their castle. Maybe they want to put up 50 bushes or something. What is the extent of pushing down CPTED? Has that been discussed at all? Does it make sense what I'm asking, hopefully?
Yeah, and I don't know if Phil has experience in integrating CPTED into a comprehensive plan more than I have. You're welcome to come join me on this answer, but from my understanding, staff could get certified in doing CPTED review, so we could do that at like a plat level or in the downtown for new facilities. I think we could make recommendations, and then it'll come down to discussions with the planning commission as we go through updating our ordinances as to what level we really want to get to.
Fair enough. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, under utilities, you have require or encourage developers to provide EV charges. I don't like requirements or shalls, right? Because I think we should make this more flexible. So you can certainly encourage, but that would be based on the developer themselves and whether people want to buy there. I mean, I would avoid personally. That's just my opinion. But things that require or shall, right, or make it hard and fast, because this overall is just a vision. It's not necessarily, we don't want to. I look at it as a vision, overall vision, not as a specific tasks to be done. Which is just my point of view. Under housing, of course, which is our biggest discussion or biggest change, obviously, we have, the public has spoken and they want, things to kind of be focused into downtown, things to stay the way they are. So I was surprised to see that we would put in the nodes section under land use. I could see a nodes, perhaps if we were a 50 square mile city and it was hard to get to downtown, but I'm just surprised that this would be accepted or wanted by a wide variety of people. If, I would not be in favor of this for our small city, personally. I think that people could easily get to downtown and that you may have a few people who would like this, but you're going to get a lot of backlash if there's a little store going up next to a neighborhood. People weren't aware of it. So I would not be in favor of nodes personally. And then a question about, there's a note in here about how you as the commission and SCJ were just made aware of the King County planning policies. So, I mean, that seems like that's going to have a major impact on this plan, and we just are now learning about it. Is that, why is that? Why did we not, what is the surprise element there? Why, and then how much is this going to affect what you're now doing from now to the end? Right, that's a big concern because there's 50 pages in here about it, and they seem like they're all required things. So could somebody let me, where are we at with this King County planning policies and what's required?
Yeah. So while the state statutes always talked about having to provide housing at different levels, King County took it up a notch. And we heard in, I want to say April, that they've been sending a lot of plans back that they've been reviewing because they just didn't quite meet all of these countywide planning policies. And specifically looking at implementation plans for the 0 to 30%, which is harder for smaller jurisdictions if we don't have a housing, Arch is basically our housing department. And so I'm researching, we're gonna be talking to King County next week, staff are with SCJ, just to kind of find out what level of policy they're looking at. I have been looking at the King County comprehensive plans just to see what their policies are, and they still are fairly high level. And that is my hope at this time, that we can find ways that's realistic for Newcastle to plan for these different income bands and have a realistic implementation plan. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation next week, and I'm happy to report out however that works out best for everyone. We can talk about that.
So then, if I can repeat back to you, so it sounds like that King County is rejecting or disagreeing with plans based on the provision for income levels, because this policy has 29 elements to it, right? And so the element really that sounds like they're objecting to is planning for the different levels of income, right? Not the rest of it in here, but the levels of income.
Mm-hmm. Levels of income, explanation of traditional harms to BIPOC communities and writing those, which we worked on last year as part of our middle housing grant. And then the other one was just finding ways to spread different levels of housing throughout a jurisdiction. Now, Newcastle, and I did have the opportunity to ask this question, Newcastle has a lot of different topography and existing neighborhoods. So we will be talking about that more, but he's like, yes, we do understand that different jurisdictions have different challenges in terms of things like topography and existing housing stock.
Okay. Well, that kind of segues to my next question. So this is one element, but it's all over this King County plan, and it says, and I'll read it here, it says, document the local history of racially exclusive and discriminatory land use and housing practices consistent with local and regional fair housing reports and other resources. So what that's saying is that, hey, you bad Newcastle, you've been discriminating and now you got to fix it. And I disagree with that completely. There's been no history in Newcastle of discrimination, of racially exclusive practices and all that. And we're asked to correct something we've never done. So I would hope this doesn't make it into our plan because we're not guilty.
From reading King County's plan, my current assumption is that we will use what we found out last year, which was there were large plans done by C.D. Hillman. Some people may have seen that name on their title or their legal description of their homes. And he was C.D. He made some raw deals, and their there were discriminatory practices within those plats. Those have been further subdivided in Newcastle, and a lot of those plats of land were developed later in Newcastle than in other areas. So like Kennydale was the closest area that I could find that had anything documented with discriminatory practices, like deed restrictions based on race. And so we can either extrapolate, as I haven't seen any evidence yet, that perhaps they did, but those areas developed later. We're just gonna have to kind of work through that a little bit with King County as we come up with more detail.
Okay. Yeah, because that concerns me. I mean, the identity politics stuff is, and the victim stuff, you know, I get it, that in some places in the country, but not in Newcastle, right? And I just don't want to see us taking responsibility for something we didn't do, right? So this, the way I read this is that the city itself has inconsistent practices, not referring to necessarily a developer or something. So personally, I want to see that not make it into our plan. So, and there are some things in this King County that I agree with, right? I mean, there's not all of the 29 elements are bad. So, another one here further on talks about, I'll read it, adopt inclusive planning tools and policies whose purpose is to increase the ability of all residents and jurisdictions throughout the county to live in the neighborhood of their choice. I'd love to live next to Bill Gates, but I can't afford it, right? So, I mean, it's great that we provide, and we should be providing all available housing options, but it's not appropriate for somebody to say, well, I deserve to live in that neighborhood, right? You got to earn the right to, you know, to earn a living, to earn the ability to own a home. It's not a given. So, I mean, this is, I hope, again, this does not make it into our plan because, you know, it should say something, and I'm okay with it, says that Newcastle will strive to provide, you know, affordable and reasonable housing wherever in the entire community, but you can't just say I want to live there and we got to make it happen, right? That's a little silly to me. And a couple more here. There's a section in here, and when it requires us to have a certain number of homes, it says we got to have, I think it was 283 emergency. What does that mean exactly? When that comes to mind, I think a emergency shelter, a homeless shelter or something. What does that mean?
So there's guidance coming out on this from Commerce. They're referring it to as STEP housing now. It does have to do with transitional shorter term housing. And it's not that we can't make people develop here, but we have to show that it could be accommodated here. And that is what's going to come out over the next few months as we work through the plan.
I mean, we're kind of limited on our buildable lands for that kind of stuff. So let's say in a year or 2 years, the county, it sounds like the county reviews this every year. So the first question there is that require a lot of our effort each year? Are we going to, because now it sounds like something new, will we have to devote a lot of staff time to answer questions from the county every year, or how difficult will that be?
That's a good question. Luckily, we have a database where I think we'll be able to spit out some information and talk about what's happening. And, you know, we're part of ARCH. That's huge. And I also want to point out that this transitional housing doesn't all look like, you know, large apartment blocks. It could be a small cottage housing development
Sure.
for families who are recently homeless because somebody lost their job or something along those lines. So they come in all shapes and sizes, and we just need to show that we're doing our part in our land to accommodate and remove barriers to these. And so I'm hoping that to answer your question, that the data will be available to us and it won't take a ton of staff time.
Okay. All right. Is there, So at the end here, it talks about, adjusting strategies and so on. That, I mean, as long as we show that we have a plan to do all these levels of housing, even if we don't build a single one in 5 years, I mean, there's not a penalty. There's not a, I mean, the county can't say, well, you're going to fine you. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but I want to make sure what are the consequences if we, as long as we show a plan, even if we haven't built anything, because for whatever reason, we're okay. Is that correct? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and that's a good question to take to the county next week when we talk with them. If anybody else wants to speak up, please let me know. I feel like I'm taking the mic here.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, you entirely on the spot.
No, it's fine, because I've been looking into this myself. It's like, what does this actually mean as a city for us? And they did mention somewhere that we would have to potentially modify our comp plans, and I don't know what that looks like at this time. But again, I hope to-
So in other words, possibly, hey, your strategy isn't working, you need a new strategy, maybe, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think that was the extent of my questions. I had several that were similar, so.
To address your question about nodes, a little bit of background about that. That came up late in the process, and it was about the time when there was a lot of interest, or maybe some news articles talking about how popular it was in Seattle neighborhoods to have places like this that were walkable where people could meet. And there was even some attempt at the state level to pass legislation that would sort of enable this. And we thought, well, we don't really know how that would fly in Newcastle. Let's put up a board at our open house and see if people are interested in it. And we were actually surprised by the level of interest in it. Me personally, not speaking for the commission, I think if it would only make sense for Newcastle in a neighborhood that wanted it. If they perceived that this plot of land would be a good place for, I don't know, a coffee shop, or, I don't know what it would be. I think right now it's just pie in the sky stuff. But it would be nice to be able and to enable it if it were wanted. That would be my condition, I think, if I were king.
And I would agree with that statement, right? I mean, I think it's really important that, and we've talked about this on Through Streets, that we have to empower the people that are already here in these neighborhoods. So if an entire neighborhood said, build a Starbucks, I mean, yeah, that's their neighborhood, right? I agree with that. So that's why I'd like to see language, and I've mentioned it to you and others on the commission, is that whether we have Through Streets, for example, right, we should survey the people around and decide. We should give them some input. So the comp plan should say, I don't have the exact words, but something like, based on community input and agreement. So, because there's, two sides to it. But I think, however, like some of the stuff is, like the parks, that's obvious. We should do that, right? I don't think anybody would object, but in certain things, you might want to think of a way to get local commitment to a certain thing, right? Whatever the thing is. So, and then I'll also mention it, because we got a few minutes here. And I had sent this to you in an email much earlier this year, but we, again, we have no land, really, a lot of land, but I would not be opposing, I would not write off whole sectors of business like light industrial or something like that, right? I mean, there's 3D manufacturer, right? That's pretty small footprint, or somebody wants a little CNC shop or something. I mean, those are feasible things which could generate revenue, but they don't qualify as like, let's say, retail business, for example, right? So I would hope that we would allow more broad types of businesses possibly, right? Obviously to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, but I don't want to see us shut that out like it seemed to be in the last comp plan.
One thing I'd like to learn more about as we make that decision is what businesses generate the most tax revenue. And I just in the last couple of days, former council member Carol Simpson made available to the commissioners document that, a study that was done in 2015 called the Burke Report, which was a study of business development opportunities within the city. And in that report, it ranked the income generating capability of different categories of business, and I was surprised that retail surpassed most of the other ones. So that would be another thing that we'd want to look at carefully about, making decisions about what's available. But in my opinion, if a business that generates tax revenue that isn't retail, it doesn't generate as much as retail, but generates more than a house, that's something we ought to, and it's compatible with the other uses. I mean, we don't want a machine shop next to a grocery store necessarily, but if it's compatible, I think we ought to, encourage it.
Okay, good.
Well, let's kind of run out of steam. Who else? Steve, go ahead.
This is for you again, and potentially for your conversations with the county. But and maybe check me on my concerns here, but it feels like the state and the county are creating policies and mandating the communities to carry them out, and even providing suggestions for overcoming cost barriers. But Mayor Clark mentioned penalties for not complying, but are there incentives for compliance? And the question is, they talked a lot about affordable housing, but I don't see anything in the documentation about them addressing rising property taxes or inflation, energy costs, the deal they just made with Puget Sound Energy to basically eliminate natural gas over the next few years and force homeowners to pay for their own appliances to replace them to electric from gas, gas costs and carbon fuel taxes, supply chain issues, rising crime and insurance costs. So there's a lot of things that's creating hardship on our people that's generated by our government, but they're forcing us to provide affordable housing. There's a huge question mark behind that. And I'm just curious if there's an opportunity here for our communities to push back on what our state and our county is asking us to do when they're creating an environment that makes it virtually impossible. Do you have any thoughts about that?
That,
Or is there an opportunity to have this level of discussion in your meetings with the county?
yeah. I'm going to work, I think, backwards through your questions. The affordable housing question is a difficult one because we, especially let's say East County, even Seattle itself has developed in a way that is a lot of larger lots, and it has gone that way. Like that's been the trend. Larger lots, fewer opportunities, zoning out the ability to build smaller housing types. And by excluding those in our cities, we've kind of come up with this pickle that we're in where we just don't have enough housing stock and we don't have enough types of housing stock. You have people competing. Maybe there are people out there that could afford $800,000 homes, but they're competing for the $400,000 homes because there aren't many of that middle. And I'm just making something up. I don't know if that's true in the terms of the actual prices. But what I'm saying is more people are competing for fewer housing units that are available. So what the county and the state are asking us to do is really look at what we have and remove the barriers that we can. Some of those are state mandated, such as the middle housing requirement. And the county's asking us to look at our policies and look and test ourselves. Where are we comfortable going with this? What kind of creative ideas can we come up with? Not everything is going to work in Newcastle that works for King County. Right? We're a lot smaller. We have a lot fewer resources. So in terms of penalties, if we're not in compliance, or I hate to use the word compliance, if we're not addressing the policies from the state and the county. One is that our plan would not ultimately be, we could adopt it, but it wouldn't be adopted or recognized by the state. And then we wouldn't be eligible for things like PSRC grants, which we do apply for. In terms of, there have been instances where cities fought back, and there were, if you're not, the county could sue the city for not being in compliance, and there have been growth management board hearings where the board ruled on the side of the county. So there's case law out there saying that this sort of vertical compatibility is a requirement. But you're right. I mean, if we, and I think this is maybe where I asked Scott the question of what are our opportunities to talk about unfunded mandates with the county beyond my small part of it. You want to address that?
Well, I think as far as communities trying to get together to push back, I think that's happened, at least at the state level. 2 legislative sessions ago, there was pretty widespread, at least from the cities. So I attended the City Action Days for 2023, and at least from the cities in general, there was an incredible amount of pushback on some of the housing bills that then moved forward. And so a lot of that pushback has been tried. And so that's challenging where there was pushback from cities, but legislation moved forward as it is. I do think that we want to keep, I think it'll be very productive for Director Fitzgibbons to meet with King County and make sure they understand our concerns, and that I think our job is going to be to show that we're doing the best we can in our community with the way it's developed and what's available, to show that we're trying to make a dent. I don't believe that the county will be able to. We have housing numbers, goals, and this is our target, and we have to make progress towards that, but hitting 1,480 is really is a pipe dream by 2044, but we have to make progress. I would defer to our city attorney if we wanted to ask him the question, but I don't think that we could be deemed out of compliance with the Growth Management Act based on some technicality, because we were only so far in our progress towards housing goals, or part of the concern with the way that the county seemed to be going was that we had to show that we actually had the land available for some of those goals, and that simply just doesn't exist in the city of Newcastle right now. City Attorney Chambers, he was of the mind that they can't require that of us. We have to show that we're planned for it and it could happen, and we have the zoning and we have the availability as things redevelop and things like that for the plan to happen and for us to hit those targets. But unless they can point to something where we're simply not making an effort, that's really what is going to be asked of the city, is that we show that we have plans in place that to move towards those goals, but it's really up to developers to make that happen. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I appreciate it. I think the message is that creating different housing types isn't necessarily going to solve the problem for the low and the very low income people, especially in King County. And we have King County pushing these mandates, and it's almost offensive how many times they talk about overcoming cost barriers. When, like I said, costs are created by things totally out of our control, but in control of our government. So this is just the message I think that we can send back to the county, that this is nice. You talk about pipe dream, I don't know if I'd use that in the meeting there, but it's barely attainable, if at all. That's my comment. Thank you.
Go ahead, Don.
Is it not true that we're considerably ahead of what is required by the state and the county in our available space?
I'll defer to Aaron a bit. I think within the current planning period, we are. With the new planning period coming up, we are not.
Yeah.
That's a new requirement for the new planning period.
Is it not possible that we would continue to stay ahead of what they're looking for?
Again, I'm going to ask Aaron to clarify. But I believe the 1480 is a new requirement in the new planning period. It doesn't consider what's happened already or anything above what we did in the previous planning period.
Yeah, so it's a new goal. It's almost, okay, wherever we are, now we have 1480 to accommodate. And we'll do a whole new analysis with what we built in the last time period, in probably about 8 years, more or less.
Go ahead, Ariana.
Thanks. I just want to reiterate for people listening, the city, we're talking about the city making accommodations so that it's possible to reach these goals. That's all we're required to do. Because we're talking about private property and then the people that own that property deciding to develop or redevelop their personal private property. So the city can't force, the county and the city and the state can't force people to do that. They can just provide goals and incentivize as much as we can, which I think we'll get into that part of it later down the road when we're talking about downtown strategic plan and that kind of stuff that Bill kind of alluded to in his presentation. So I think I started out, I'm excited, I'm thankful for the work that's being done because I think we're doing the work. I think we're doing it. I'm not worried about getting in trouble because I feel like our community is doing what we are being asked to do, and we should all be really proud of that work. So I'm excited.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. Yeah, I just like the rhetoric to state that, or the record to state that the rhetoric of let's try to, can we show our work and then not actually provide, or have there not actually be more housing occur, not to be unanimous. I think it behooves us for a lot of reasons. I'm interested in actually trying in this document that we're only able to update every 10 years, come up with practical solutions for more people to be able to call Newcastle home. People that work and live near people that work near Newcastle can live here and afford to live here. I think it behooves us for multiple reasons. One being that we I think Councilmember Tallman had a good point when he was talking about there are a lot of levies that are brought forward by King County, right? They decide they want something new and then they push it forward in a levy, right? And we have somewhere between 88 to 89% of the tax burden we're going to feel for the average household, not from the city. So if we want to look for long-term planning, and the bar is just going to keep getting pushed, right? We're going to have to provide it eventually, whether folks want to or not. And I think there's a very good human reason to provide it, but density is a tool for us to limit the additional cost to our own citizens. Because density is a tool for us to bring in more revenue. Density is a tool for us to prevent those property taxes to our own citizens in that 11 to 12% of cost to our own citizens that we might be able to control. And I think it's actually less than that, but density is a tool for us to prevent property tax for our own citizens. I think the reason that the county and the state are bringing forward these mandates is because a lot of city councils and a lot of small entities have been having this exact conversation for decades and decades and decades of, well, how do we do the bare minimum? How do we not provide any more housing? And we are the council, and we are at that time in that critical inflection point where we have to actually deal with it. So I want to provide practical solutions for people. Let's make it easier to get an ADU. Let's push for mixed-use zoning in the downtown core. Let's have conversations with people about it so it's not scary. I don't want to try to do the bare minimum and just show our work and then not do anything. Let's figure out what practically makes sense. Maybe it's not a lot because we don't have a lot of land, that is true. But let's do what we can to control what we can control, as Councilmember Tallman was saying, with that small amount of tax burden that might come from the city, try to limit that and allow more people to call Newcastle home. I think I feel very strongly about that, and I want to make sure it's practical and not just what can we do to actually help people live here, as opposed to what can we do to get the county or the state off our backs.
I'm sorry, there's no public comment? Excuse me, ma'am. Folks, I'm sorry, we're not allowing public comment tonight. There's a public comment coming up in the main meeting, and you feel free to come and speak at that point. Thank you. There's a public comment. We're having a main meeting at 7. You can come and you can make a public comment. There's a period of time. I'm sorry to hear that. That is a Bellevue situation. Yep, thank you. Okay, as far as this meeting goes, is there any other person who would like to comment or a question? So Charlie, you got any final thoughts?
Well, two things. One, a point of clarification, we can actually update the comprehensive plan every year. What we don't have to do is a thorough overhaul. That's every 10 years. So we can fine tune this once a year, every year. And I also just wanted to offer the other commissioners an opportunity. If anybody has something they would like to say to the council, you have that opportunity. So raise your hand if that's the case.
First of all, I'd like to say that I appreciate the opportunity for all of us to be here with you today. Thank you for inviting us here. And I'd also like to express appreciation for your continued involvement in the process over this last year and a half. Planning commission meetings can be lonely events, and it's been really great to have your involvement in this process all the way along. And I guess I'm not going to address any specific comments that have been made, but I guess I want to underscore that the exchange of ideas and the differing ideas we're seeing here is exactly what we as a body have been trying to sort out, right? We're trying to thread the needle on a lot of this and do it in a way that is acknowledging of the legal requirements that are in place. Really respectful of the fact that there are targets that are laid out by the county that are real things that we understand are intended for our attention. We're concerned about what all you think, and we're concerned about what we've heard from the citizens through this public outreach. And there are a lot of different opinions. And as a vision document, you know, there's kind of the center of the Venn diagram that we're trying to shoot for here. And there are a lot of good ideas, and a lot of them aren't going to come to pass, largely because we're not in the business of doing the development, right? I mean, we're trying to put together this platform so that to the extent development happens here, it's something that we all agree this is what we want for Newcastle. We know it's why you ran and got elected, right? It's what you want to do, and we support that. And I think it was you, Commissioner Charbonneau, that said this tonight. Forgive me if I get this wrong, But, you know, we're at an inflection point here, right? There is pressure in terms of figuring out what's going to happen with growth. And there's a lot of pressure in the community from people who moved here because they love it the way it is. And, you know, there's not an answer for that, but I think there will be opportunity over the coming years with the document that we end up reviewing and putting together to make changes annually as needed, to interpret it through ordinances, to work with developers to try and find these solutions. Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing here. So that was my comment. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Scott. Anybody else? Any last minute thoughts? Otherwise, oh, go ahead, Jim.
Hi there. I'm going to share two concerns I have. One is just in terms of the timing. We're running out of time. And I feel like we've been kind of talking about this a lot, but the rubber meets the road with U7, right? So I just want to get something in front of you so you guys can say what you want so we can have a conversation. This is the first we've talked, you know, the people that actually get to decide what the comp plan is going to say. So I hope that we can get something in front of you in writing quickly, because what you care about matters kind of more than what we care about. Even though we've talked with everybody, at the end of the day, you got elected, it's up to you guys. So I want to get something in your hands quickly. The other thing that concerns me was mentioned, I don't know what the King County guidelines, how much that controls that. Kind of the goalposts moved a little bit on us, right? Because we were so ramped up, we had everything we need, and then, oh yeah, by the way, you got to do what these people want too. So we're trying our damnedest to get you guys something that you can work with. But I just want to say thank you for your thank yous, because we do spend a ton of time going through the language and debating it and talking a lot. And Len's out there in the audience cheering us on, but it's basically us and Len. And we're just so thrilled to be in front of you guys finally to give you our work product. And I hope to, you know, get your feedback soon and work with you further. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else? Son, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to give a huge shout out to our planning commission because I attended your meeting. I really witnessed how lively and deeply concerned you showed and throughout several hours of that night. And I came here, didn't expect for several hours, and I stayed until the end. I did made comments at the end. I just want to say thank you all, and also for our city's department and leaders and directors. So this is not easy. So we can't find the clear answers right now. So truly we need to work together. So we share the common goal and how we can find practical ways, and also to also listen to our residents, as Mayor Clark said. How can we really work together to find a solution and not to say, oh, we're not doing anything. We are doing our work. Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, we will stop until 7 o'clock when the main meeting starts. I want to again thank everybody for being here. Bill, Aaron, all planning commission members, thank you. Thank you. And I know you got another meeting tomorrow, so way to go. Good job. Okay, adjourn till 7. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. The time is 7 o'clock. Welcome to the Newcastle City Council regular meeting. Today is May 21st. Time is 7 o'clock. My name is Mayor Clark. This regular meeting is being broadcast live on our city's YouTube channel, and it is also being recorded for future viewing. We just concluded a special 1.5-hour meeting with the Planning Commission and where we discussed the comprehensive plan and its update. So everybody please rise and join me in the flag salute. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Burford. Here. Councilmember Sherlock. Councilmember Griffin.
Here.
Councilmember Tallman.
Here.
Councilmember Charbonneau. Deputy Mayor Lacotia. Here. And Mayor Clark.
Here.
All here, Mayor.
Thank you, City Clerk. Next item is agenda approval. Are there any required adjustments or additions to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, show tonight's agenda approved as written.
Mayor.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. There will be one for the public's announcement. We are adding the last minute addition, which will become item 8.4, and each item will move down from there. A discussion of the NPDES permit. Sounds exciting because I'm sure it will be. That is going to be item 8.4 on your agenda report. So apologize for that not being printed out or broadcast earlier. Okay, now, moving on to public comment. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for public comment? A reminder that if you were going to make a public comment, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood. You'll have 3 minutes in order to discuss what you'd like. At the conclusion of 3 minutes, the buzzer will sound. We ask you to wrap up your comments. So, Robert Henry, go ahead, please. Turn on the microphone, please, Robert.
That on? Yes, it sounds like it is. Mayor and City Council members, wanted to give you a status update on the DeLeo Wall. The DeLeo Wall is a 50-foot cliff that's on the very southeast corner of Newcastle. It's surrounded by a 35-acre parcel. That parcel had a permit to clear cut. The permit was issued by the Department of Natural Resources about 6 years ago. The parcel they pay a piddly amount of tax at $70 a year. From the top of DeLeo Wall, you can see all the way to Mount Rainier. You can see most of the King County Plateau. The DeLeo Wall is connected. There are trails that go through the DeLeo Wall coming from the city of Newcastle and also going into the King County Parks area. It's possible to walk from Newcastle all the way out on these trails, all the way out to the Idaho border, which I think is really cool. So the Department of Natural Resources issued a logging permit to clear cut the parcel. The Department of Natural Resources oversees logging in the state of Washington, and they can and they do ignore the city and the county's ordinances, practices, and the data which they have. There was a nice article that talked about this, how the Department of Natural Resources can basically steamroll all of the local agencies because of the way the law is written. That law has not changed. Anyhow, there was, the permit was issued 6 years ago, and there was a huge public outcry. There was a campaign to save the DeLeo Wall, and I'm amused to see that even now your webpage, that the photo on your webpage for the City Council shows a meeting in which we had about 150 people come and talk about how they really wanted to see the trails continued, and they wanted to see that this land be purchased by the city or by the county actually to turn it into parkland and probably join it up with the Cougar Mountain the Cougar Mountain Wildland Park, adjacent to it. So anyhow, everything's been on hold because of the pandemic. The people that were running the campaign to save DeLeo Wall, which is partly myself and partly Eva Lundell, kind of lost focus during the pandemic. But I'm here to report that yesterday the logging permit expired. So the trees are still standing. We can still move forward as a community and decide what, if anything, we can or would like to do with the property. It's especially important, I think, to get the King County involved in this because in 2020 or thereabouts, the county had allocated money to purchase the property from the owner. The previous city attorney had begun a long series of fruitless discussions with the attorneys for the property owner, and they never really got very far. There was a lawsuit which the city of Newcastle filed, and the lawsuit was finally heard after lots of delay, and the city unfortunately lost the lawsuit against the DNR. So I have some handouts here, which is just basically the PowerPoint deck I meant to show, but I figured out I couldn't do that, so I can pass these out now, or what would you like? What's appropriate?
Just hand them to the city clerk, Robert. Yep. Thank you. City clerk, has anybody signed up online? Anybody else from the audience will give you an opportunity if you'd like to make a public comment. Seeing none, the public comment is now closed. We have no ceremonial presentations. Moving on to council comment. And I've lost track of where we are, but I think Councilmember Sherlock, why don't you start us out?
Thank you, Mayor. No comment.
Councilmember Burford, any comments?
I just want to take this opportunity to talk about May is AANHPI Heritage Month. So right now we are still in May. I just want to let everyone know about how special in our city this means. Because according to the most recent data, we have 39.6% Newcastle Asian population. Also here, in June of 1977, U.S. Representative Frank Horton of New York and Norman Mineta of California introduced a resolution to establish Asian Pacific Heritage Week, only for a week back then, to be celebrated each year at the beginning of May. Senators Daniel and Spark of Hawaii introduced similar legislation in the Senate. The following year, in 1978, President Jimmy Carter signed into law a joint resolution to establish the annual event, and the first celebration took place in May of 1979. In 1992, the month of May was designated by President George H.W. Bush as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. The annual celebration honors the many contributions and accomplishments of Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders Americans, and Native Hawaiians. This May, we proudly observe AANHPI Heritage Month, recognizing the outstanding achievements and the contributions of our city's Asian community, which comprises 36.97% of our population. We celebrate the legacy of coal mining in our city, Newcastle, and the numerous Asians who have played a crucial role in our city's development and the growth of the greater Seattle area. We are honored to be part of this vibrant and diverse community and reiterate our commitment to promoting inclusivity and equity for all. This is about AAPI. Secondly, I want to say equally, doesn't matter about order, honoring 350 years of Jewish American history this May, building on the success of the 2004 commemoration, brings hope and optimism for the years to come. Also, this week, let's celebrate the backbone of our city, Public Workers Week, from May 19th to 25th. We recognize the incredible work of Newcastle Public Works Department. They handle everything from roads to parks, ensuring our city's beauty and functionality. Please join our council in applauding their dedication and hard work. And thank you. Also, in honor of Peace Officers Memorial Day on May 15th and National Police Week, we pay tribute to Newcastle's fallen police officer, Richard Herzog. Deputy Herzog, we salute and thank our Newcastle police officers for maintaining the best police department and achieving significant crime reduction in our city. We recognize the police officers who put the service before self, demonstrating unwavering and unbiased dedication to public safety, which enhances the quality of life for our community. The outstanding work done by our police officers reaffirms my commitment to fully support and fully funding our police force. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all for your dedication and service. I attended all 3 Sundays with a cup at Frosty Barrel. Also, I once again thank you, Frosty Barrel, for this active partnership and participation. Thank you, our chief and all the officers here. Thank you. That's it.
Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. I just want to highlight last Friday was signing day for student athletes at both Hazen High School and Liberty High School. So it was really cool to see kids, notably some I've worked with, that and young adults that have, through hard work, got to earn a scholarship and continue their education at the college level. Especially for me as a former college athlete, it's just really great to see those kids in our community working really hard and seeing that be paid off. Public Works Week, thank you to all our Public Works folks. I'll bring back my favorite quote from one of our Public Works members ever. I was talking to him after he was working on a tree that fell in the middle of the road. Told him, thank you for doing that. He said, Paul, don't thank me, this is my Super Bowl. When that line always stuck with me of I know it's a joke, but for how excited a lot of these folks are to actually do that work. So we appreciate them and very much need them and benefit from their services. And it was great to see everyone at the town hall.
Councilmember Tallman.
Yes, actually, regarding town hall meeting that we conducted on May 7th, I really appreciate all the citizens that showed up. It's nice to interact directly in that type of an environment where we can just answer any questions and address any concerns. Really appreciate the support that we had from the community on this council's focus on public safety and fiscal sustainability. So thank you for making that happen. Thanks a lot to our city staff and even the planning commission who helped put that together.
Deputy Mayor Lucotia.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, same here. Thank you for the town hall, everyone. And also next Saturday is tech class at the Newcastle Library. So if you know of any senior adults who are struggling with technology, please send them to the Newcastle Library. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor comments. So I simply have 2 things. This weekend is Memorial Day. Monday is Memorial Day. Please remember why we have Memorial Day. Hundreds of thousands of men and women have died so we can all be here in freedom. So take a few moments out of your day to recognize them, or just a moment of silence or something. That would be appreciated. If you're interested in attending a service, my VFW post holds a service Monday at 10 a.m. at the Issaquah Hillside Cemetery. Everybody's welcome. Looks like the weather might be okay this year. And I know you can also go to other things in the area. I know they decorate Tahoma National Cemetery, so with every grave with the flag, so it's pretty inspiring. And on June 4th, I'm happy to say that here before the meeting at 6:30, we'll be having a Vietnam Veterans Pinning Ceremony. So if you know of any Vietnam-era veterans who served between 1955 November and 1975 May, please let them know, right? I have a bunch coming, and my VFW post again will be pinning these veterans in recognition of their time in service. So I'd like to spread the word. I know there's more than 8 people in the community, but I've reached out, and so please help out if you can, and you're all welcome to attend. That's it for my comments. Moving on to the next item, we have the first quarter police report. So Chief Kajihiro, come on up.
Okay, this is the first quarter crime stats. You can go to the next slide, Jeff. Okay, so this stats come from basically our crime analysis unit and also sector program. I got help from our crime analyst. She's sitting right there. She, I guess starting a couple months ago, she comes every Wednesday here, and she's a King County asset from Precinct 3 and also up north, the North Precinct. But she's in our office at least once a week. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this crime report, like all the others, it's reporting on 3 categories: crime against person, crime against property, and crime against society. Next slide. Okay, crime against property. Last year, 2023, it was 128. In 2022 was 99. Went from 99 to 128. This year is down to 118 for the first quarter. Crimes against person went from 15 in 2022, 11 in 2023, and 10 in 2024. And crimes against society went from 1, 0 to 1 in 2024. Next slide. Okay, as you can see here, overall crime against persons is down 9%, which is one crime. Crime against property went down 8%, and crime against society went up by 1. So yes, it'll be 100%. So as you can see that there, overall change went from 139 in first quarter 2023 down to 129 in 2024. So it's a 7% reduction overall of all crimes. Next. Okay, so this is individual first quarter stats on assaults. Went from 6 in 2022, 3 in 2023, and 0 in first quarter 2024. Vehicle theft, that's the major issue I think in the city. Went from 2022 up to 25 in 2023, and it's down to 20 in 2024. Burglaries, 2022 was at 16, went to 13 in 2023, and it's at 14 this quarter. As you can see, residential burglaries is 3 out of the 14, so 11 of that was commercial burglaries. Next slide. So larcenies, shoplifting went from 0, 1, and up to 3 in 2024. And theft of auto parts, that's like catalytic converters and stuff like that from the cars. It went from 13 in 2022, 12 in 2023, and now it's down to 6 in 2024. Larcenies taken from auto. It went from 20 to last year was 21, and this year is up to 26 in the first quarter. Next. What happened to these cases? 2022, we had 16 arrests in the first quarter, 12 arrests in last year, first quarter. This year, we're up to 21 arrests. Next. Okay, citations. 2022 was at 45. Last year was up to 433. This year is at 184. Collisions in 2022 was 16. Last year was 9. This year is 20. Injury collisions, that can range from somebody just saying ouch to somebody seriously injured. It went from 2 in 2022, 4 in 2023, and 2 in 2024. Just note, our traffic car was gone most of the first quarter. So that stats doesn't very much count for our traffic car, because he was away, I guess, being a provisional sergeant and unincorporated. So next slide. Okay, comparisons for dispatch calls for service. 2022 was 423 calls for the first quarter, then went up to 470. This year is at 616, but the actual calls for service is at 381, less than last year. 235 out of the 616 was generated by us administratively for directed patrol missions. Because of the auto theft problems and stuff like that, I'll address that later, but we had directed patrol missions, so we caused the dispatch calls for service on that. Next. So I can see dispatch calls for service versus on-view. In the first quarter of 2024, there was a 31% increase in officer on-views compared to first quarter in 2023. In the last month, well, from February to March, there has been a 24% increase in on-views. So as you can see, in 2023, there was 813 on-views in the first quarter. This year, first quarter, went to 1,066. That's self-initiated activities, whether it's suspicious, business checks, area checks, traffic stops. And the dispatch calls for service in 2023 was 470, and we adjusted the number, taking out the directed patrol missions. It's at 381, so it's down 19%. Next. Okay, as you can see, Crime Analyst did a look at the previous 13-month history. So there was a 10% increase in officer on-views compared to the previous 13 months. So that went from February 2023 to February 2024. So next slide. So you can see here, from February 2023 to 24, there has been an 8% reduction in crimes against person and a 1% reduction in crimes against property compared to the previous 13 months. That includes everything, all crimes put together. Next. Okay, so if you look at this, from February 2023 to 24, there was a 40% increase in auto thefts, 42% increase in commercial burglaries compared to the previous 13 months. But there's reductions in larcenies and residential burglaries. If you look at the larcenies, it went down from 232 to 221, so a 5% decrease, and residential burglaries went from 39 down to 28, so 28% decrease. Next. Okay, okay, from February 23rd to February 2023 to 2024, there was a 3%, so basically two arrests more increase compared to previous 13 months. Next. Okay, so what are we doing? Due to the activity at the apartment complex, commercial areas, we work with the crime analysts, and the last time I believe we brought crime analyst Jamie here to kind of explain what we're doing. So he's selected locations around the city where it was most likely to have these auto thefts or crime occurring. So we conducted, I guess, directed patrol missions where the officers would go there throughout the night and patrol there for 15 minutes at a time, being highly visible in that area. This included the apartment complex and also the Newcastle Shell, because we're getting a lot of activity at the Newcastle Shell. So we spent some time there trying to prevent some of the commercial burglaries there. So our detective also used his unmarked car and conducted surveillance in several locations or occasions trying to locate the suspects. We are we're currently planning a meeting with apartment managers trying to get all the apartment managers together for a networking and education meeting, just so they all on the same page, they can communicate, know each other. Because we found out that some of the managers don't know the managers right next door. So we want to make sure they all connected and they can communicate. We also passed out steering wheel locks directly to the apartment managers to give to their residents. As a result of the emphasis in that first quarter, we reduced the cases by 5. Next. Okay, at the request of the Public Safety Committee, we kind of diverting some of the patrols, and we're spending a little bit more time in the neighborhoods and being highly visible. Also, we have been walking the business area doing area checks, whether it's with the reserve or myself or our detective. He'll put on his uniform, we'll walk the business areas and say hi to people. We did foot patrols down Lake Boren and try and contact kids and pass out stickers. Next. Okay, this is a detective update. First one would be the commercial burglary at the Shell station. Four people were charged with commercial burglary. This is when the suspect backed the truck into the storefront. And the suspect was identified by a surveillance video, and Detective Martin worked with Snoqualmie PD to solve this case. The next one is theft from model. This happened at the Avalon Apartments. Detective Martin was able to identify the suspect, and he filed the case with the King County Prosecutor's Office. And that was for identity theft, right? Okay. Next one, the suspect was shoplifting at the Arco station. He was previously trespassed from there. He came back, stole cigarettes, and we were able to develop probable cause and arrest the suspect for commercial burglary, basically a felony. So, next. DV court order violation. Person was violating the order, which in that case, it turned out to be a felony violation, so that was filed with the King County Prosecutor's Office. Also, there's an organized retail theft case. Detective Martin got some surveillance video from the Bartell Drugs, and with assistance from outside agency detectives, they were able to identify the suspects and they charged them for theft. Next, our day shift officer, Gutierrez, is patrolling Newport Crossing Apartments during the day. He found an occupied stolen. He ended up arresting that suspect, and that suspect was booked. Next. This one here would be Detective Martin. He was able to identify a suspect in a fraud case. He wrote some search warrants, and charges was filed to the King County Prosecutor's Office. Next, Mod Pizza reported a possible theft from an employee. Investigation was conducted and was able to file charges for theft second. Lastly, there was a internet crimes against children search warrant was served on a Newcastle resident, and the detectives arrested the male for possession. Bear with me on this. This is a long one. Possession of depictions of minors engaged in sexually explicit conduct in the first degree. So he was arrested for that. Next. Okay, so what we did also was we conducted another business watch meeting on March 26th. We added, Councilman Tallman was there. We added I think 8 new businesses to the list. Next. Next one is Blockwatch. Blockwatch we conducted on May 27th. We hosted a Blockwatch meeting, but we also went to the reserve HOA meeting, and we added the reserves to the Blockwatch. And they have actually meetings scheduled all the way to next year, like every other month. So, next. Okay, Next, what we did some community outreach, Sundays with a Cop at Frosty Barrel. We did that on several Sundays, past couple months. The reason we do it on a Sunday is because we allow kids and their parents to come. Because if we do Coffee with a Cop during the week, it's only the people who don't work during the day can show up. So we try to do it on a weekend so we get more access to everybody. Also, I was invited to Hazelwood Elementary School to read to the kids. So I was, hey, I can read. I read to the kids. It was about Read Across America Day. So I did that and then made a showing at the Lake Bourne egg hunt. Next. Okay, this is another one that I did an ad. Reserve Deputy Tim Brewer. He retired from the King County Sheriff's Office last year in June. And he served in the Honolulu Police Department for 6 years, and he was a King County Deputy for 24. I have known him for a long time, since I worked in Hawaii. So when I talked to him, he decided he'll come work for us here and he'll volunteer. So he's been, he came out about 3 times since I brought him aboard about a month ago, and he's just been pairing up with the officers, walking around and volunteering his time. Next. Okay, MPO Treadway, he was selected as the officer of the first quarter. You know, he is, he's a leader with the city, with Newcastle. He gives residents a lot of citations, a lot. So anyway, he has stepped up his responsibilities. He was a provisional sergeant for the King County Sheriff's Office, and he always been helping me out and stepping in the role of acting chief when I'm gone. He's willing to speak to the council here, willing to come to all different community events. Next, upcoming in the second quarter, Renton Police Academy, or Police Youth Academy, will be from June 24th to 27th. Myself and Deputy Gutierrez will be representing Newcastle there. I believe we have approximately 7 to 8 kids from RISDN there. So this is in partnership with Renton PD, King County Sheriff's Office, and the DEA. Next. Oh, I forgot one thing. So this announcement is kind of like a really tough one. I thought it would come a long time from now, but it was cut short. You know, after all the community service events, enforcements, some of you might be really happy with this announcement. Some of you might be sad. But I just want to congratulate MPO Treadway. He's getting promoted to sergeant, and he's leaving to SeaTac in June. You want to say something? If you want to. If you want to.
I think that's the definition of voluntold.
Yes.
Yeah, so June 8th, I'll be leaving to go over to SeaTac to become a sergeant. I've been here in Newcastle for almost 4 years and have enjoyed every minute of it. And I truly wouldn't be leaving if King County wasn't making me. I love it here. I love working with everybody here. Director Bronze and I work pretty close, and all his public works guys. Council member Griffin and Sherlock have been here pretty much the whole time that I've been here. So just thank you for all the support and collaboration. And I've already been talking to the chief, and I'm going to try to come back as much as I can and help with community events, and who knows, maybe even drive through the city on the way to SeaTac and do a traffic stop or two, write somebody a ticket.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So thank you, everybody.
Yep. With that said, I have selected Deputy Malik Knight. He was a former Washington State trooper, so he'll be starting, well, he's actually kind of already started taking on the role, making the transition, but he'll make the full transition soon to the traffic officer. So, that's it. Any questions?
Questions, go ahead. Councilmember Tallman.
Yeah, just really quick. So we have noticed an increase of visibility in the neighborhood, so thank you for that. I think the entire community will appreciate that. Can you tell us what types of crimes are driving the increase in on-views call for service?
The on-views calls, you talking about the calls for service or the on-views?
Well, on-views.
On-views can be anything. It's not necessarily just crimes. It's can be area checks, business checks. Driving through your neighborhood, officer can put it as an area check. Can be anything self-generated. So there's, I wouldn't say it's crimes driving it. It could be like, for example, the auto theft that Deputy Gutierrez on view. So that's considered an on view.
Okay, thanks. So the focus on Kias and Hyundais and handing out the wheel locks, do you think that's why we have a reduction in vehicle theft?
I can't answer that. I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. Well, it's good to see the reduction there. Thank you.
Councilmember Sherlock.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, as always. I'm wondering if, so we get these stat reports, which are appreciated. Is there any additional context that you can give us as far as, like, you know, you see some things go up and some things go down, but I have conversations with you outside of these meetings, and it feels like there's some things like service calls. We actually want to see that go up because that means that, or correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like that's something you want to see go up sometimes because you want people to be engaged and feel like they can reach out to you all. So do you understand what I'm saying? Like, what's some of them, what's the context? Is it good that, not necessarily good that things are up, but what are you looking for success?
So, well, one of the things with driving up the calls for service, I mean, that's good, because that shows that people are calling in and stuff like that. So that's one of the big reasons why we do these community events, to build the trust in the community, the face-to-face interaction, right? You can drive to the neighborhood, wave to people, but I'm gonna be totally honest. If I was in my front yard mowing the lawn and an officer walking my dog and an officer come stop with me, I wouldn't be too happy because I'm busy, right? But everybody's different. That's just me. But, you know, and here's the funny thing is people appreciate in neighborhoods, and I appreciate it because I see cops driving through my neighborhood all the time. I appreciate that. But we actually had a citizen come in and complain that we're in the neighborhood too much. Is that right, Matt? And they wanted to talk to us to reduce tension. And we're like, what tension? We're here addressing stop sign violations at 116 and May Creek Park Drive. So there's two sides to everything, where some people might not want to see us, some people want to. But, you know, having a balance of going in, driving around in the community is valuable, but also having a community outreach program where you do Sundays with a cop, you do coffee with a cop. Even for us, attending 4th of July or Newcastle Days, right? I mean, all that is important in the grand scheme of public safety because people feel approachable. So when something happens, like high-profile case in the city, or I would say in the country happens, people will look at it different because we already built the relationship with the community and with the people.
Okay, I have a question, Chief, and this, it just occurred to me, so it may not be for you, it might be for Director Bruns, but, you know, copper prices are reaching record highs that have never been seen before. And I know in the past, we've had people stealing wire out of the ground here at Newcastle. And so I guess, Director Bruns, you know, based on those previous experiences, like along the Lake Bourne, for example, they ripped all the wire out. Have we hardened any, you know, manholes or wire, you know, handholds or anything like that?
Yes, Mayor Clark. After it was, I don't remember the year, but it's probably about 3 or 4 years ago on Coke Parkway, a bunch of illumination wire got stolen. So we replaced that wire with aluminum wire, and then the junction box lids are welded shut.
Okay, all right, yeah, I thought it was something like that. I just,
Yep.
Yeah, because I expect we might see that again.
So we've not had any theft since then.
Okay.
And Mayor, just to make note, some of that commercial burglaries there are from copper wire.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Go ahead.
This is actually a question for you, Mayor. Would it be okay to hear from the update from the Public Safety Committee now, since the chief is here? I don't, it's your decision, it's your agenda, but it seems like a good conversation.
Sure, why not? Councilmember Tallman, you want to add a couple words on our Public Safety Committee? Good
Sure.
idea, thank you.
We're a little ahead of schedule, but absolutely. So on May 6th, we had a Public Safety Committee meeting. We invited Chief Kajihiro and MPO Matt Treadway, also the crime analyst Gloria Laura was there. So thanks you guys for that. We had a great discussion. We talked about crime. We talked about items that we're elevating and different solutions. One of the things that we're trying to do with this committee, this was our second meeting, and what we're trying to do is educate the committee on how the city operates, how the police department operates, and how the courts operates. In our next meeting, we're going to have the prosecutor. And then after that, we will build a roadmap in terms of how we're going to address concerns and issues that we have throughout the community, and then start making recommendations or suggestions to the city council in conjunction and collaboration with the police department and with the community. The most important thing is the community engagement part, is that once we feel that we understand and everyone in the committee understands city operations, police operations, the courts, then we can create a message, a positive message, a truthful message, and talk to the community and get more feedback from the community in terms of what their concerns are. We know that one of the biggest issues is just trying to get people to call if they see something or hear something. Saturday night, 1 a.m. in the morning, there were some loud explosions. They weren't M80s, there was something else at the park. And I talked to several neighbors, and they didn't call the police. And I thought, why didn't you call the police? And they didn't have an excuse why. But I think you guys got the call and then showed up around 1:40 or something like that, and whatever it was, I don't know. But that's one of the things we're going to try to do, is encourage, from a positive standpoint, the people in the community just to engage more with the police and to call the police if they see something suspicious or if they experience some kind of crime. But that's, any questions about the Public Safety Committee? Well, go ahead.
I was just curious what, I know that with the ad hoc committees, typically there's like a stated purpose or goal, because ad hoc, in our rules, I don't have them in front of me, but it talks about how they're kind of not permanent committees, so they should have like a purpose, and I, have put this out there to the mayor. So I'm just curious, are you guys working towards whatever that it ends up being, or have you already put that together with the committee?
Yeah, that's just part of the roadmap. So we're trying to understand the landscape first before we start building a roadmap, but it is about public engagement. It's about crime reduction and addressing all public safety concerns, not just crime, but bike paths, et cetera.
Yeah, I guess my point is that typically with the ad hoc committees, there's a specific purpose or goal, because then the idea of an ad hoc committee is that it's not necessarily ongoing forever, and that's why I've always been kind of curious about this one, because public safety is something that is ongoing and forever. So is that something you're going to work with the chief with, or just the committee, or do you have a plan on putting that together?
Well, yeah, so when this committee started, I mean, when the first night we talked about it, and there was some literature, basically, the purpose of this committee is to get the community involved further in public safety through understanding the issues of public safety and reaching out to the police, the prosecutors, the community, and you caught me off guard. I don't have the written goal in front of me, but we did do that, right? We did put that out, and this committee, I don't have an ending time frame, but the Councilmember Tallman has said this is, we're gearing up to understand what the issues are so that the community, members of this committee, can reach out to their constituents, or their, not constituents, but their, residents in their areas to gather a better view and understand why we're missing some things. Like, why do people not call the police, right? What's going on with that? That's a big issue, right? How can the community help reduce crime? So all these things, and I know we put that out at the first meeting, so forgive me, I don't have that in my materials tonight, but we'll send that back out to the council.
Yeah, or I've had people ask me who's on that committee, and I don't think it's posted anywhere
We
right
put that
now,
out
so.
in an email to, and it was posted in one of our agenda packages previously, and it was also emailed to all the council, for sure.
Right, I guess can it be on the website or something with
I
like
suppose we
the
could do that.
purpose and
Sure.
who's on it, so that
Yeah.
people can reach out to them? Because
Absolutely.
people are like, who's on there, so I can reach out to them? And
Right.
I was like, I don't know where to point you to, so.
Yep, we will work with the city clerk to get that on the website. Absolutely.
Can
Good
I
idea.
add something?
Sure.
So one of the things what we do on the police side, to reach out to the public, to get messages out, is that's why in this past year I've been working on the neighborhood block watches to get that up and running. A lot of that, I try to get it up and running, and I offer our services to show up at meetings and stuff. I want the citizens to take the initiative to get to know their neighbors and get the block watch up and running, and invite us. We'll show up. We'll show up and engage and do communications. If not, that's why we do a lot of community events to get messages out, what you guys are trying to do. On our end, that's what we already been doing, and that's kind of a proven thing with neighborhood block watches, the business watch. Now we're trying to do something with the apartment managers, because I want to get the apartment managers knowing each other and get that network going. So a lot of that communication, what you talk about, we're already doing that on our end, and that's why we big on that. That's why we King County Sheriff's Office just hired a chief for community engagement, added another chief position for that, and ramping up the efforts on community engagement and public interaction. So, and
Any other questions or comments on, go ahead, Councilman Scarpa.
Just really quick, I want to say thank you, Chief Cachio, for you're doing a ton of community outreach. I think in the cumulative between reaching together with apartment managers, even getting together on a weekend to be more accessible to folks, going out to the schools. I think that's really awesome. You're going above and beyond, and I feel like I'd be remiss not to point that out. So thank you for doing all that and your effort in doing all that. I know I see you everywhere I go to something that's Newcastle, so you are not going unnoticed. Thank you for doing all that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief. We appreciate the update very much. Okay, next up on our agenda, item 8.3 is the Q1 financial report. Director Chambers, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I am here tonight to present briefly on the first quarter of 2024. As you remember, we are required by RCW to present quarterly to the council and include a comparison of expenditures and revenues, actuals versus budget. So that's what's included in your report. Hopefully you found some time over the weekend to sit and enjoy it. I worked hard to prepare it for you. And tonight I'll just go over it briefly to hit some of the highlights for it. So it maintains the same format that we've used in the past. We start out with a focus on general fund revenues, so we have two charts to look at. One is showing the actual numbers versus budget and the percent and dollar amount that we received, and then the chart below that is showing the current quarter compared to the previous 2 years. And again, this is first quarter data only for the current year and the previous 2 years. So the year over year is really nice to look at because you can see, for instance, our taxes have consistently increased, steadily increased over the last couple of years. But when you look at the first quarter data, it's pretty comparable. So we can consider this to be a pretty typical year compared to what we've seen the last 2 years. And then one thing I do want to bring to mind, I know I mentioned it later in the report, but when we're looking at the budget numbers in this report, they are the adopted budget numbers and not the amended, because we didn't amend the budget until April. So I wanted to keep with the adopted budgets to make sure that the first quarter is true to where we were at that time. So everything in here is as of March 31st. So we would want to see revenues at or above 25% through the first quarter of the year. And you can see in a couple of them we're pretty well over that. Development had a really strong first quarter, and a lot of that came in March when we had a significant influx of revenue for the Heemstra and Lee Beimer properties, or developments, excuse me. Tax-wise is what we would expect. The majority of the taxes that we've received in the first quarter are sales tax and some of the state shared revenue taxes. And in particular with sales tax, the breakdown was 47% for online sales, 42% for retail, and 21% for construction. And assuming this would be sales that took place most likely in the November, December, January timeframe, because we have typically a 2-month delay on receiving those taxes. Seems pretty typical because we would have had more shopping at that time and less construction. So that's good. That matches up pretty well with what we would expect. And then we also had some revenue in the miscellaneous revenue. You'll see that's as expected. So the primary driver of the miscellaneous revenue is the interfund service charge that we implemented for 2024. This was a new item in the budget. So what this does is the general fund receives revenue from the street fund, transportation capital, parks capital, and swim funds. And this is to help recoup some of the overhead costs that the general fund bears for items such as payroll processing, invoice payments, building and planning, staff time that supports those other funds in one way or another, but isn't getting charged directly to those funds. So we use the interfund service charge to help with that. And what we're doing is the adopted budget amounts are being deducted monthly. So we'll see the same amount. It'll be consistent throughout the year. And then once we have all the actuals for the year, we will go back and reconcile that, meaning we will go back and do the calculation again with the actual numbers instead of the budget numbers for everything. So that way we'll know if we need to adjust any of them and make sure that none of those funds bear more than their fair share of that. So that's something we'll see to continue to stay consistent throughout the year. And then when we present the fourth quarter report, we can report on the reconciliation that we had to do and any significant changes to that. Some other things with the revenues that I think I wanted to point out is the intergovernmental revenue. The state shared revenue has been coming in pretty close to expected, which is a good sign. And then we also have a couple grants in the general fund that we are expecting later this year. Those are primarily related to the comp plan, which we discussed tonight, and missing middle housing. So as they get that work done and get that invoice out, I know they have deliverable deadline, so then we'll see that grant revenue come in either the second or third quarter this year. Moving on to the general fund expenditures, we have two charts listed here, so similar. We're looking at the budget to actual for the departments, and just in two forms, just if you're visual or a number person, they're both there for you. We would expect, again, expenditures to be under 25% at this point in the year. And for the most part, that's what we're seeing. Overall, general fund expenditures are only at 11%, which seems awesome. But being that it's only the first quarter, we got a lot of invoices in January that were actually for 2023 expenses. So we haven't spent all that much so far this year. And with the development revenue coming in, we'll start to see more consultant fees as they work through those plan reviews and such. So we will see a few of these departments go up pretty significantly getting into the second and third quarter. But for right now, it looks great. A lot of the spending that we've had has just been our ongoing operational costs, salaries and benefits, some supplies, some maintenance items. But like I said, we'll see some of the consultant fees and such, professional services, we'll see those start to ramp up as we get further into the year. Next, again, for the expenditures, we have the same chart where we're looking at the first quarter of 2024 compared to the previous 2 years. And you can see that most of our, quite a few of our departments are either comparable or they're a little bit lower than the previous 2 years. One that is a little bit different, it kind of stands out, is public safety, and that is because we had to carry forward our December 2023 invoice. We missed it. We missed paying it in 2023, so that was paid in January. So that's what that spike is for. But otherwise, most of them are pretty comparable or lower than what we've seen the last 2 years, which is good. Some of that has to do with the staffing changes that we made, and then some of it just has to do with staff trying to be as responsible as they can. After that, we get into, on the last page, we have just a single chart. Like I said, we like to focus on the general fund for this report because that's the fund that we have the most concern with and typically focus on for the budget. But the other funds do have some things to discuss. So the chart that's included shows both the revenue and the expenditure actuals to budget. And I kind of like to think of it as a tale of two stories, because in the general fund, revenues have been coming in pretty strong through the first quarter and expenditures are lagging behind. But in the other funds, we kind of see the opposite. So Parks Capital, Transportation Capital, SWIM all had projects, as we know, that rolled forward into 2024 that weren't complete before the end of last year. So the spending looks pretty high, and we can see that in all three of those, they have a negative change in fund balance, meaning their expenditures have outpaced their revenues for the first quarter. But a lot of that is due to those projects that have carried forward, and now that they're completed or close to completion, we'll start to see the grant revenues that we've been awarded coming back in as we request reimbursement for those. So I think by the end of the second quarter, if not into the third quarter, we'll see those start to level out a little bit more. We will have some new projects that are scheduled for 2024 starting up as well, but at least in regards to those, when you're looking at the fund balance change, it's not a huge concern at this time. And that's why it's just the flow of the expenditure going out and then the reimbursement coming in later. So just want to point that out. And then again, I had a note there just as a reminder that the expenditure, the budget amounts listed are what we adopted. And so when we get to the second quarter, we'll see those amended numbers reflected in there. In conclusion, like I said, we have just a couple highlights in these funds to go over. The street fund, I know we talked a lot about with the fourth quarter. We're working really closely, the staff, city staff together is working really closely along with working with King County to make sure we're maintaining better control over that agreement with them and really keeping watch over what we're spending and making sure that we're not getting too ahead of ourselves. So that's going to be a big focus for this year. We also decided it's not reflected in here because this was already posted, but we made the decision to start transferring to the street fund on a monthly basis. So in the past, we've generally done it at the end of the year. And since we have the two transfers coming out of cumulative reserve and general fund budgeted, we decided to transfer each month that the street fund is lagging. So if the street fund doesn't have enough revenues in the month to cover the expenditures that have gone out, we'll start transferring from the cumulative reserve first and then from the general fund to basically bring the street fund up to zero. And so what that'll do is it'll help us monitor the street fund as a whole better, because we'll have a better idea of where the street fund balance is as we're using up those transfers. And then when we get to the end of the year, we'll know how much is left to transfer, how much is available to transfer to the street fund, and be able to get a really good idea of where it's sitting. And like I said, we'll transfer out of the cumulative reserve first, and once that budget amount is used up, then we'll transfer from the general fund, and we'll do that up to the maximum of what the budget amount is. So that's something we'll come back to, but I think doing that monthly rather than waiting until the end of the year will give us a really good idea of where the street fund balance is. So because I know that's one that we really want to watch closely. Transportation and capital projects, like I mentioned, have those, transportation and parks capital funds have those projects that have rolled over. They were all included in the budget amendment. So again, some of those expenditure numbers that look a little bit scary, those will level off once we add in those amended numbers in April. IRF had very little spending. We're still waiting on vehicles to be delivered and invoiced to us that are on order. So we'll see if those show up in the second quarter, hopefully. And then as far as facilities goes, the primary drivers with facilities spending is we paid the insurance bill. That's always done in January. And so when that was another change we made for 2024 is that full amount of the building insurance was charged to the facilities fund, which ended up being about $58,000. And then we get, we had, I don't remember the exact number, but somewhere in the amount of $15,000 to $16,000 that was reimbursed from the property management company. So that would be the tenant share of that that insurance cost for their space in this building. And then we also, the remainder of the facility spending is the CAM expenses, which is the building maintenance. So all that is pretty close to what we would expect. So again, not a ton of exciting activity other than development revenue in March. That was really great to see. Overall, we have, as of the end of March, we had almost 21 million in LGIP. We did transfer a little bit more in early May, because we got most of the property taxes in. And so we moved what we felt comfortable with over to LGIP to try to gain some investment earnings, because those are doing really well. And as soon as the police contract payment comes in, then we'll have to move some back to cover that. But overall, first quarter is looking good. So with that, I meant to be a little bit less long-winded. I apologize. But if you have any questions and want to continue the conversation, I'd be happy to entertain those now.
Questions for Director Chambers? Nope, you were very thorough. You eliminated all the questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up is our agenda change for the NPDS permit, new item 8.4. I see Brian's at the podium. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Brian Miller. I'm your Surface Water Program Manager. Thank you for this time to present to the Council. This presentation is on the upcoming changes on the NPDS Municipal Stormwater Permit. Next slide. First, we'll begin with NPDS. What does it stand for? National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. The NPDS is a program established by the Federal Clean Water Act. It is a permitting system that regulates point source of pollution, water pollution, and with the goal of improving water quality. It begins with Clean Water Act at the federal level, which the EPA delegates enforcement authority to Washington Department of Ecology, also known as the DOE. With less than 100,000 population, much less, Newcastle is considered a Phase 2 permittee. The first permit was issued in 2007 and renews every 5 years. The next permit cycle is from August 1st of this year to July 31st of 2029. Overview of changes. We will be continuing with ongoing programs on the existing permit. There will be additional stormwater planning and at a higher level of mapping requirements. The new programs include tree canopy goals, street sweeping, stormwater management for existing development have been added. Stormwater design manual is also updated and proposed will increase stormwater management needs for capital improvement projects within the right-of-way, such as general transportation projects, underground utility projects, and pavement maintenance projects. Next one. Tree canopy goals. City jurisdictions are required to map tree canopies in all owned or operated properties. Newcastle is already working on the tree canopy program and will be using member jurisdiction grant funds from King Conservation District to do the tree canopy assessment. Next. Street sweeping program. Requires cities to implement the street sweeping program by July 1st, 2027. In addition, the Department of Ecology also provide additional clarification on how to dispose of processed wastewater picked up by these street sweepers. Fortunately, we as a city are currently doing this, and we have been doing this since 2012. We currently contract this out. As you can see in our picture is our contractor. Next slide. Stormwater management for existing development. Implementing programs to improve water quality within existing development. We selected the May Creek watershed as an area of focus. Projects can include stormwater facility retrofits and customized stormwater management actions. Every jurisdiction will have a defined quantity of acres that will be needed to be managed on a population basis. Ours is 1.3 acres. This will all be addressed during our comprehensive surface water management plan update scheduled for this year, 2024. Next. Increased permit requirements. In addition to these new programs, some permit requirements have been increased. This proposed changes will affect the capital projects in the right-of-way and private development. These changes will require an increase in amount of and size of water quality facilities, which will in turn increase costs. Next. Transportation-related projects. This is the big one. Water quality and detention facilities are required for a certain amount of hard surfaces. Currently, most sidewalk projects don't trigger stormwater requirements because of their under 5,000 square feet of new hard surfaces. The new permit requirements evaluates new plus replacement hard surfaces, as you can see in the diagram there. For example, this project proposes to add new sidewalk and replace pavements over one of the lanes. You can see there the new sidewalk. With today's standards, the square footage would be evaluated on just the new sidewalk alone. With the new standards, the hard surfaces, both new and replaced, would be evaluated. This will increase the number of projects that require water quality and detention facilities. Proposed timeline. Here's a timeline of the changes discussed today. The new permit is issued this August. By June 30th of 2027, Phase 2 jurisdictions are required to adopt the new manual. Our code adopts King County Stormwater Design Manual as it is released, which will be before this deadline. Projects in design prior to June 30th, 2027 are able to use the current design manual if the project begins construction by 2032. These proposed changes will significantly impact capital project costs. Some key takeaways. New programs have been added which will be addressed in the comprehensive surface water program update. Increased permit requirements will have a cost impact for both city projects and the development community. The largest impact will be to transportation projects. Now, a final note, the permit is still in draft form and the final version may change slightly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian. Questions for Brian? I have one, Brian. So when you mentioned the street and the retention, extra retention, you're not talking about just during construction period. You're talking about runoff retention.
Yeah, pollution-generated surfaces.
So, in other words, if you have a sidewalk and a street and you normally have a little storm drain down there, it goes to some kind of a little basin, but now we're saying that that basin, is it for the purposes of settling the water out? What is the purpose? Because it's going to eventually leave and go out.
It is, and what it's trying to do is we utilize different methods. Catch basin is one, but you could use tanks, vaults, sand filters, those type of elements, bioswales, LID, those
To
type
remove the sediment before it leaves.
Yeah, and pollutants,
Gotcha. Okay.
correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Okay, next, new item 8.5, council committees. Finance Committee, do we have anything to report?
Finance Committee met on April the 25th, and we got a snapshot from Director Chambers. Director Chambers did a good job in showing us where the revenues were. She also indicated that the software was up and running and they was working well for them. She said that there was a lot of things that when she came here was not up to date, but they are now caught up and operating like they should. We thank you, Director Chambers, for what you do. We appreciate you. The committee then discussed the biennium budgeting. And we decided that we're not going to recommend that for this year. We'll wait at least a year because of the things it causes for the finance department that they're not quite ready for. So that's pretty much what we did.
Okay, thank you. The Salary and Benefits Committee met last week. We have not had a formal meeting yet. The last formal meeting was during the last session or the last council makeup. So we had a meeting on Zoom and I was elected to be the chairman. So we discussed suggested changes. City Clerk Westman said, hey, we have to do this salary survey. What do we want to do? So we had a meeting and we discussed the fact that some of our policies related to salary and benefits are in different locations, and we would like to consolidate that into the personnel manual. So Director Chambers, excuse me, sorry, wrong person. City Clerk Westman has been working to consolidate that, and we're going to bring that back at a future council meeting date to discuss the changes and the consolidation of, scattered, so to speak, policies. So we're still working through that. Any other council committees? Yeah, I'm not yet. Okay, seeing no other council committees, now we'll move on to regional committees. Anybody from a regional committee? Go ahead, Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. I attended Regional Transit Committee last week. Not too much to report there. There's been a lot of talk among different city council members about strategies of working together to advocate for more bus stops from King County Metro now that the Sound Transit plans are getting closer to actual fruition. So we're working together and having conversations about that. And then the only other thing was that King County Metro is at an all-time peak ridership since COVID, which is awesome. So about 83% of the ridership they're experiencing currently, they had in 2019 pre-COVID, when understandably so due to COVID, there was a massive drop-off. And then for Sound City Association Public Issues Committee, there's a couple small ones and one big one I wanted to flag for folks. Small ones being there's a lot of regional committee vacancies. If anyone from Newcastle is looking, there's about 5 or 6 spots open. They're great opportunities to learn about an issue and dive deep on an issue. We got an update from King County Conservation District, which we are a part of. And then there's one big one that I actually didn't know myself was going on before this meeting we had for Public Issues Committee. I wanted to flag for us all because I think it'll start to affect us soon. Maybe not visibly, but overall. So there's a growing sort of problem, and maybe not crisis, but occurring in largely Tukwila, but as well in SeaTac and Kent. There are a large number of folks seeking asylum from, I think it's a couple different countries, but where there's currently an ongoing war. And they get on a plane and they land in SeaTac Airport, as you might imagine, and then the surrounding couple cities, SeaTac and Tukwila. And they had been told in their countries that Tukwila, SeaTac was a place they could go, and specifically a church in that area. So they went to that church and it was fine, and the church could support, I think, 1 or 2 families and help cover them. But it's gotten to a point where I think the number of folks now is between 50 to 100, which the church cannot support themselves, as you might imagine. And the city of Tukwila has started to bear the brunt of it. So we're hearing from a Tukwila city council member about this. And essentially the largest problem is that these folks can't work because the federal political asylum process is incredibly slow, and as they, in their own words, they said, very broken. So the problem is they have a lot of folks that would be eager to work and are not causing any, disruption or harm in any way, but the cities are bearing the burden of supporting them financially for housing because they can't work, supporting them for all these other things. So in the short term, they need funding, and in the long term, they need a pathway for these folks to get jobs. Now, that doesn't necessarily fall on us, but they're starting to see more. These folks are continuing to come because they're seeing it in their own countries where they're being told that's a place they can come. And SCA is working on a means to sort of advocate on behalf of Tukwila and SeaTac and Kent that are getting overloaded right now. So I think there's going to be, at the very least, there's going to be a letter coming that I recommend we sign on to as well in support of those cities for them to get more funding in the short term, and for the county and the state to got to give them some more tools and options. So that's why I want to flag it for folks. And then I know, not that I anticipate any of those folks coming up here, but I think it's not that far away from us, and it's sort of an ongoing developing thing, and it can escalate very quickly, as you might imagine. If folks show up, they don't want to turn folks away, and we don't know how many more folks might be coming. So that was the first I heard about it. We had a pretty robust conversation about it. There's going to be more to come about it, but I just wanted to flag that for folks. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Sherwood. Let me add a note to what he said. Regional committees on the Sound Cities Association, there's a number of them. I don't have a list in front of me, obviously, but that's not something that the mayor has to approve. Like, if you're interested as a council member in one of these sub-regional committees, just let me know. That's all you got to do, and then we can get you, nominated. I don't know the process, but, if there's something that you'd like to do. Do you know the process, Councilmember Shermer?
Yes. So there you can apply directly. They send out it should be in your email inbox. There's a number of different ones. I believe I'm on about 3 right now. I think Councilmember Sherlock is on 1, and we don't really have anyone else, I think, as on the specific SCA committees. There's different committees here and there. There's so you go to the email, you fill out a short application. You can just use your resume that you've already had, and then just write a short statement. They're trying to be respectful of your time because we're all busy folks. So you write a short statement about why you'd like to serve on that committee, and then currently there's a couple spots open on the Domestic Violence Initiative Task Force, 3 on the Joint Recommendations Committee, which makes funding decisions for the county as a whole. It's actually a pretty important one, and then 1 for local hazardous waste management.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tomlin?
Thanks, Mayor Clark. On Friday, May 10th, I attended the East Side Transportation Partnership meeting. The meeting was mostly about budget shortfalls, rising construction costs. There are fewer and fewer large contractors, which eliminates competition that could drive costs down. And so they're just trying to figure out how to balance the budget to keep the priority projects going. A topic that affects all of us is the state is conducting a study on a road usage charge that would potentially replace the gas tax. And so they're just looking for different ways to generate revenue from every vehicle on the road versus just the vehicles that are driven by fossil fuels. That's an update. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other regional committees? Councilmember Burford?
So last week, I attended as a water resource inventory area. It stands for WRIA 8, Salmon Recovery Council Partners. We had a product meeting, and the council approved over $7 million in 2024 grant funding recommendations to 30 proposals for habitat acquisition and restoration projects, and also monitoring and assessment efforts and outreach and education programs. The council also heard presentations and had discussions on the following. In short, predator control work by Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife in the Lake Washington Basin, funded by 2 recent state legislative budget proposals, and also directed WRIA 8 staff to draft a letter to WDFW to develop a predator control program for the Lake Washington Basin, also to help improve survival of Chinook salmon and other type of salmons. And another one, success story presentation from King County on the Rainbow Bend mitigation project on the Cedar River, which enhances the adjacent large-scale floodplain restoration project completed in 2013. So that's about the regional committee I'm working with. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next up is the CAC report. There's a copy in the agenda. I don't see anybody here from the CAC, but you're welcome to read that in our agenda. I'm sorry, there's members here, but anybody? No? No, okay. All right, so moving on to city manager report. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. I'll try to be brief. Happy to take feedback tonight, but just wanted to put back in front of the council, Issaquah School District still would like to have some kind of joint meeting. At this point, they've asked if we can look at something in September or October. I think those are tough months, but if we can think about what might be options for us, they said that they're willing to come to one of our meetings or accommodate our meetings. But they're looking out that far at this point just because they're more off during the summer than we are. And so just happy to take feedback, but I'll continue to put it in the update to ask for thoughts on that. Wanted to keep that in front of the council, though. They continue to want to try to find some kind of a time to have a joint meeting. I just want to keep it on the, make sure the council's aware. We're working on wrapping our heads around the speed camera option, I guess. There's only a few vendors, period, that provide speed cameras, and so really just making sure we know the difference between them. The bigger lift is really just understanding some of the logistics. Somebody has to look at all of the violations to make sure they're violations. We want to make sure we understand how that works with our municipal court contract. So we're going to work through some of those logistics along with where we can actually put them based on the new legislation. And so as we get answers to those questions, we'll keep it in front of you. That's all I got for today.
Questions for the city manager?
Just a quick comment. You reminded me, I have been getting questions from people in our community about, I think there's a little bit of confusion. We're talking about speed cameras now, but then we did the license plate readers, or that's happening at the same time. So just a heads up, also maybe to the police department, that people are a little bit confused on that. And so just a heads up to, it's not difficult to explain, but I've had a few people ask me about it, and it's, yeah.
Yeah. And
communication might be a little bit better to the community about like what we're doing now and what we're looking into.
Sounds good. And if anybody has questions on the license plate readers and what we're doing with those, we're happy to talk about that. We do have a general time frame of late May, early June as far as when they'll be up and running. And once those are up and running, we'll certainly push that out.
Councilman Tomlin?
Just really quick. So we're adding the solar-powered speed signs on 116th, correct? Or are we talking about adding the speed cameras on 116th?
So we're looking into, so new legislation was passed that allows for speed cameras. Now, we're not talking about the speed signs.
Right.
We're talking about speed cameras.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, city manager. Okay, moving on. Any objections to the consent agenda or desired changes to the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, show the consent agenda approved unanimously without discussion. We have no public hearings and we have no unfinished business. General business, item 12.1, discussion of council communications, council or city attorney Chambers. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and good evening, council members. I know I'm bringing up the rear here, so I will try to keep it short, but I think it'd be good to have a good conversation or discussion about council member communications with the public. And I also have an update from a recent United States Supreme Court that discusses the issue and gives us some pretty solid guidelines for how to differentiate between personal communications and official communications when we're talking to when you all are talking to the public. So the first thing I like to remind all the council members is by becoming a public official, you do not lose your First Amendment right to express yourself in your individual capacities. All right, council members and staff all retain that right. It's your right as an American citizen. And what we're trying to do is ensure that the public understands when you're speaking in your official capacity and when you're speaking in your personal capacity. And that does two things. One, it lets the public know who's speaking to them, whether it's their government that is speaking to them or individuals that also happen to be government officials are speaking to them. And so it lets them know if their rights are being infringed because perhaps the government is going to be doing something that that could infringe on their First Amendment rights, whereas as an individual person speaking personally, you can't infringe on their individual rights. So by delineating the difference between the two, helping you with some guidelines on how to communicate with them. Not only does it assist the public in knowing who's speaking to them and in what capacity, but also ensures that you as elected officials and the city are protected from potential claims of infringing on citizens' First Amendment rights. So the recent case that came out, it came out mid-March 2024, is a U.S. Supreme Court case called Linkey v. Freed, and it essentially says that if you want to have people understand that you're speaking in your personal capacity, this is mainly geared towards social media, right? Any kind of a blast like that, newsletters that go out in emails or social media, those are the real concerns here. In this case involves Facebook. That you simply need to identify it as your personal account. And the court is very clear on that. While that presumption can be overcome, the court says it's a very heavy presumption that if you identify it as a personal account, that is you not speaking in your official capacity, but rather you speaking in your personal capacity. And I think we've been generally, well, the city has given that advice pretty consistently over the years, that we would request that is how you identify your individual newsletters, your individual social media accounts when you're speaking to the constituents. And so it's good to hear that the U.S. Supreme Court came down with a bright line rule, as bright line as the Supreme Court's going to be at least, that is the way to differentiate between your official and your unofficial capacities. The Linkey v. Freed case dealt with a city manager who had a public-facing personal page, and he talked about all sorts of different things on it, right? Personal and potentially city business stuff during COVID. Lockdowns and whatnot. And there was a resident of the city who was not happy with how the city was handling COVID, continued to post on this personal page, and the city manager deleted the posts and then eventually actually blocked the individual from interacting on the page. And what the Supreme Court said was, there's a twofold question. One, did the city manager have actual authority to speak on behalf of the city for those topics? And then two, was the city manager exercising that authority when he was posting on his personal page? And so those are factual questions that are expensive and stressful and time-consuming to find out. And so by simply stating at the top, this is my personal page, these are my personal opinions, then you can short-circuit all of that difficult work and all of that fighting over whether or not it was public or private right off the top. There are some areas that the court suggested could overcome that presumption. They're extreme and involve issues that I think are highly unlikely to come up here, so I'm not going to delve too deep into them. But that is the run of, I guess, the lay of the land there. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has on that. And then secondly, just going to, what do you say to your constituents? Again, you guys have First Amendment rights to say what you would like to say. Obviously, hopefully it's truthful, and that's the name of the game. But that's it. On top of that, you have adopted council rules that give you guidelines for what is expected and not expected for council members and how to communicate with their constituents. One of the things in it, for example, is that council members should respect adopted policy. Right? You do speak when usually a majority, sometimes a supermajority, but basically you speak when a majority of you vote for something. You adopt policy, and the council handbook says that you should respect that. Respect can mean a lot of different things. I can't define what that means in one way. To me, one of the things it likely means is don't hinder staff from carrying out their policies, right? I mean, that the council has spoken. That's a direction to staff to go out and carry out the will of the council. And so you can disagree with what that policy is, but don't actively hinder staff's job of carrying out the mission of the city. What I don't think it means is I don't think it prohibits a council member from expressing their disagreements in public of that policy. I think that that is a, not only a First Amendment protected right of a council member, but what you're generally elected to do, right? To tell the people your positions, advocate for your positions, while still being respectful of understanding that your position might be in the minority at this time. So that is the general update. I was very happy for the Supreme Court case to come down because it used to be a lot more amorphous and scary for me, so now I'm happier that there is that rule. So I'll ask again on behalf of the city that if and when you do communicate with the public in your personal capacities as individuals, to make that distinction clear that this is your personal page and these are your personal opinions, feel free to read the policies and procedures about different ways to format newsletters and social media pages to assist the public in understanding that this is your personal page and not an official City of Newcastle publication, which do come from the city, and the city does in fact own those. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions. I appreciate that's kind of a lot of information on what I consider to be a fairly nuanced and difficult topic, but that's the update.
Thank you, City Attorney. So I'm going to add a couple words here before I take any questions. But the reason this has come about is because Councilmember Sherlock is writing a newsletter. I previously wrote a newsletter my first year on the council till personal issues precluded my time. I fully support her and anybody up here writing a newsletter. You're right, like the city attorney said, right? As long as you say it's my own opinion. She and I have talked about it. I don't have to agree with what she says, but it's her right, and I'm a First Amendment absolutist. So I want to read, and I disagree with a lot of my friends on this, by the way. So from our manual, it says this. Council members take final action by majority vote, so the council acts as a body and speaks with one voice. I have people telling me, well, that means you have to say the same thing or act the same way, and I don't agree with that, right? What that means is what the city attorney said, and this is my interpretation, but if we vote 4-3 to change the speed limit on a road, and I'm in the minority, and I don't agree with the speed limit, I can't say go break the speed limit because I don't agree with it. I say I don't agree with it, but you still got to obey the law, right? That's the difference. So to me, I still have a voice to say I don't agree with it, like she has a voice or he has a voice or whatever. We all have voices to say I don't agree with that, respectfully, right? But we did pass an ordinance or resolution or whatever, so we cannot tell you to break that, and we won't, or that would be an ethical problem. So I just want to make it clear that, when somebody's writing to you, you should be obvious to you whether it's a personal opinion or a council opinion. And if it's not clear, you should question it. But it should be crystal clear. And I think her newsletter, my newsletter, were clear, very clear in that regard. You don't have to agree with what we write, but that's why we're having this discussion tonight. So we'll put that to rest. So at this point, is there any questions or comments about that? Okay, I think we're clear on that. So, okay, Councilmember Griffin, go ahead.
Does this mean that in the procedures manual where it says that if the council votes on something, you shouldn't go out, somebody else, one of the council minority shouldn't go out and say, I don't like what they did?
I'll answer that. So you can certainly say that, right? And so when I was in the minority in the first 2 years, I was very vocal about it. I don't agree with what they did. I don't agree with this position or that position, but I never told anybody disregard it or you break the law or whatever. So you could say if we vote 6 and you vote 1 that you don't like something, that's your right to do that. It's your vote, and you can go say I don't agree with what they did. That was not I didn't like it. You're free to say that. Absolutely.
I was in the minority for 4 years, and this happened with the former city manager. We had a study meeting, and he accused me of going out and soliciting for against the utilities tax. And what happened when the council voted to do the utilities tax, they said, we need to go talk to the people. In the council meeting, everybody agreed in the council that we needed to go talk to the people. I never once solicited against the utilities tax, what I was doing is going out and getting people's signature for a referendum. Let the people make the choice. I told them in council, if the people say that they want a utilities tax, I'll get behind it, I'm fine. But until that happens, I'm not gonna do it. But I never went out and solicited against what the council said, and I was called on it and said I was, and I said, no, you go back and listen to the original recording, and you'll find that we all agreed that we should go talk to the people.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this? Okay, so hopefully we've put that subject to bed. Next up on our agenda is additional public comment. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up? A reminder about public comment. If you come to the podium, please state your name and neighborhood. You have 3 minutes and the buzzer will sound when the time is up. We have Ellie Diaz. Did I say that right? Okay, come on up.
My name is Ellie Diaz and I live in the Reserve. And I guess I have a few questions, and this is my first city council meeting, and I've been really wanting to come previously, but I finally made it tonight. I'm very happy to be here. There's been a lot of talk, especially in our neighborhood in the Reserve, about safety. And of course, being a mom of 2, safety is #1 priority. It's a given. But I'm a little confused about all the talk about in the HOA meetings and within the community about safety. Because I feel like as a parent and as a community member, we have one of the safest cities here in Washington, and we're so fortunate to live here, okay? So I guess what I'm wondering is, could we be a little bit more transparent with, I guess, what we're doing regarding safety in the community? Maybe getting the word out about the ad hoc safety committee, like what the purpose is, the beginning date to the committee. I guess it's already started, but when was the beginning date? Is there an end date? What are the objectives of this committee? Who is on this committee? I just want to make sure that we are representing Newcastle as a whole and we have a healthy representation of Newcastle. And giving parents, community members, the opportunity to participate in this means that we need to get the word out and establish this. So sharing more information, I think, is really important with the committee, or for myself and my family. And I had no idea that this was happening. And I have to say that thank you so much to the Newcastle Police Department, because I see you around at the events in the community. Coming to PTSA functions, being there at school. I feel like a Newcastle Police Department rocks. Like I feel like I could call you about anything and say, hey, this is what's going on. And I hear if you see something, say something. I feel like that's also a given. Like we should do that as community members to really look out for one another. Yeah, just really getting a fair representation from the community members is important for safety. And then just being more transparent about what committees are coming up. So everyone has an opportunity to say whether they would like to participate or not. And then one more thing that I wanted to say is I want to make sure that we're working with the police side by side and not undermining our PD, and trust in their experience and their knowledge. So just a reminder to everyone. And thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. I don't typically respond to public comment, but I will say that we will get something up on our website. But to go back up a little bit, we had a letter that went to every resident in the community that talked about public safety and that we were going to have a big public safety meeting, which we did. And then we filled this room, which was pretty cool. Unfortunately, communication doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't get to every person, right? And so we have the city website, we had a letter to the community, we have, these meetings, we have agendas, we have all kinds of stuff. And I'm sorry that something slipped through the cracks there, but we will get something on our website. That doesn't mean now it's going to reach everybody. I hope it does, right? But we'll make sure that we add that extra step. And these meetings are always open to the public, but if it's not clear how to get to one of those meetings or any committee meeting, you know, I don't know what we can do, but we can look at other ways perhaps. And we're open to the community. Any other public comment? Go ahead, Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Quigg. I live in the Vineyard. And I like what you just said. I agree with it wholeheartedly. Nice work, guys. I'm here because a mom that wanted to speak couldn't make it here. I was talking with her about the fact that I was driving here from work and had a meeting with the council, and she said, I want to say something. And I guess she couldn't do it on Zoom, so I said, well, just text it to me and I'll tell them what you think. So here's what another mom from Newcastle wants to say to you. This is my daughter's best friend's mom. She says, hi, I live on 85th Street Southeast in Newcastle, Washington. Part of what I love about my neighborhood and what makes it special is that it is a small dead-end street with just 13 houses. I know all of my neighbors. We watch out for each other. My 3 daughters enjoy, she's got 3 daughters. That's why she's not here right now. She's got 3 daughters. One of them is very tall and is my daughter's best friend, I gotta say. She's a great gal. My 3 daughters enjoy playing basketball, soccer, riding their bikes, skateboards safely on our dead-end street. I'm concerned about and against, she knows I'm on the planning commission, which is why she sent this to me. They ride their skateboards on our dead-end street. I'm concerned about and against through streets from a safety standpoint. I used to live on 116th Street Southeast, which was a through street, and vehicles consistently cut through our neighborhood at high rates of speed. I didn't feel safe having my kids ride their bikes, etc. on that street. I also admit that I used the new development on 84th Street to quickly get to May Creek Park Drive and Coal Creek Parkway. For these reasons, I'm against 3 streets in Newcastle. Thank you for listening to my statement and for taking my concerns into consideration. I'm just reading what she said because she couldn't be here tonight. Thank you so much for all that you do. Again, thanks to the police officers and chief for all your great service. And again, it was a great meeting tonight between the planning commissioners and the council. We have amazing public servants, and it's a pleasure to be in Newcastle. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the second public comment. Moving on to planning calendar. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things to be aware of for the June 4th meeting. We have on there County Council Member Dunn. It will join us to provide a State of the County presentation for us. And then the other major thing on that meeting is talking about the Transportation Improvement Program and getting that conversation started. Generally, and then throughout the rest of the planning calendar, we have dates for everything as far as Transportation Improvement Program. We'll have the presentation and discussion at the June 4th meeting and then bring it back for council adoption. And then we'll also have a meeting for the swim capital projects as well as the parks capital projects. And so we've tried to plan those out through the summer so that we can hit those conversations before we get too heavy into the budget.
Questions for the city manager on the planning calendar? Anybody? I just have one comment. I know Councilmember Burford talked to her. She was stuck in traffic. Everybody on this council needs to get the city manager's cell phone number or the city clerk's cell phone number. If you're going to be late, that's your point of contact because you can't be texting the rest of us. We're not watching our phones. So please get those 2 numbers. If you're going to be late, you should be texting them so they can relay that to the council. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, that concludes our meeting for today. Thank you, everybody.